Morning, everybody. Just a sound check. Good seeing all the faces. Just checking that your audio is working. Just admitting a lot of colleagues into the meeting. And please keep yourselves on mute so that you don't have too many background noises. And we will be with you in a few seconds. Morning, all those who have joined. Just a sound check. Great seeing everybody. We're still admitting a lot of people into the meeting. We'll be with you in a few seconds. Morning, Ivan. Well, good morning to everybody. Welcome to this event. We've been looking forward for quite some time to this exciting event, and thank you for our host, Gary Marshall, for putting this excellent program together. We're really looking forward to this, spending some time with our host, Saifa, today. Ladies and gents, let's do a little bit of housekeeping while we're still admitting more people to the meeting. Please remember to keep yourselves on mute. And my job also is to mute you should you accidentally unmute yourself. So please bear with me. And we will not allow questions and answers during presentations. We will do that once we've got the questions and answers sessions. Then you will be allowed to ask a question. And there are two ways that you can ask a question. The one way is you can use the chat room. You can see the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function that you can use the chat room to post a question for the panelists. Or during the questions and answers, you will be given an opportunity to raise your hand and I will recognize you to ask a question. So that's the one way. The other way is that, there's people on YouTube. You're welcome to text your questions on YouTube, and we will keep an eye on those as well so that we can have the panelists answering them. Should you not have enough time to answer all the questions in the chat room, we'll make sure afterwards that the questions being addressed by the relevant panelists. All right, so keep an eye on your inbox. Should something go wrong in the meeting, we will send you an email after we join the session again. So let's have a look at our program. Let me just get my screen sorted here. So there's our program for today, and you will see me talking about the express logistics, the state of the industry. It's the 5th of May 2022. You can see we have two halves. Gary Marshall will introduce the presenters and the program to us just now. There's the first half. You can see at the end of the first half, there's a questions and answers. You were able to ask questions. And there is the second half. And you can see at the end of the second half, again, there's questions and answers. Important thing is to note that we're going to have a very nice little competition again this morning. You can see there are two prizes that you can win. The one on the left there is a notebook stand, and the one on the right there is a magnetic holder for your vehicle. Now, the question is, how can you win this prize? It's relevant, unfortunately, only for local people. We can't do it for international participants. But the way how you're going to do that is we're going to show you the sponsors, give recognition to our sponsors and our alliances of the Transport Forum in the next few minutes. And at the end of that, we're going to ask questions about our sponsors and alliances. And the first person that answers the question correctly in the chat room, he or she will be the winner of the prize. So you'll have to listen carefully while we present the sponsors and alliances, and you might be a lucky prize winner of one of these two prizes. Obviously, one prize per person, and that's only for locals. And should you be a staff member of the relevant organization, then obviously don't answer the question. So let's then, without ado, let's then have a look at our alliances and our sponsors. So listen carefully. All right, so we have 5 alliances, formal alliances with the Transport Forum, and that's the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, Express Parcel Association, which is our host today. We've got the South African Bus Operators Association. We've got Courier, that's the African Road Industry Association, and the Chartered Institute for Logistics and Transport. Excuse me. So what we do during these introductions, we give opportunity for members of those sponsors or alliances to say a few words about it. If they do not say anything, then I usually say a few words quickly. So let's quickly have a look at SAPA. Gary, I don't know if you want to quickly say a few words about SAPA this morning, our host.
Thanks, Barry. I had intended to win at 9:30, so but I can do now. I mean, SAPA represents most of the formal players in the so-called courier industry. And we represent and discuss on a regular basis. We have interactions with the Department of Civil Aviation, the Department of Transport, the Department of Digital Technologies and Postal Services, which is actually the regulating body for postal services and courier. We have regular interactions with the Transport Education Training Authority, with AXA, and a big relationship with SARS on the customs side. So we're very active through a whole lot of subcommittees that interact with various governmental bodies. SAPER itself is a not-for-profit organization. It's completely voluntary, but we do see ourselves and are regularly contacted by government as the sort of voice of the courier industry. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Gary. Much appreciated. So should one be involved in the express logistics industry, one should definitely become a member of this association and be represented. Thank you very much for hosting this event today. All right, ladies and gents, then we've got the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. You see this slide. And obviously for all these associations, you can find the links on the Transport Forum website. You can see already established in 1921. It's the National Association with members throughout the Republic of South Africa. Thank you, SAR, for your support. Then South African Bus Operators Association, formed already in 1980, representing the bus and coach industry. We've got ARIA, it's the African Rail Industry Association, rethinking rail and connecting Africa, doing lots of work now in bringing in third-party access into the system. You can see we've got the Chartered Institute for Logistics and Transport, leading international professional body for everyone who works with supply chain, logistics, and transport. We're also fortunate in having formal media alliances with the Transport Forum. There's obviously many others as well, but these are the formal agreement with the Transport Forum. Freight News, I don't know if there's somebody from Freight News who want to say a few words. Established, innovative, effective since 1953. If you need to understand and be up to date with the logistics industry, this is the magazine to subscribe to. Railways Africa, all about the rail infrastructure. And Engineering News. I see Irma Venter is also on the call. Engineering News. I don't know, Irma, do you want to say a few words about Engineering News, Crema Media? You can see they say they've got real economy news, real time, premier source of real economy news, daily coverage of South Africa's transport and automotive sectors, accurate and timely news reportage. Thank you, Engineering News. Right, we've got this platinum sponsor with the Transport Forum, C-Track. It's a leading global software as a service and a big data company for vehicle tracking, fleet management, and insurance telematic solutions. Global Trade Solution offers customers connect and consulting services. So innovative solutions transforming global supply chain, imports and exports, ladies and gents. Right, and then we've got Ticket Pro Travel. You can see it's very much a corporate online booking tool, best of both. It's a one-stop shop for all your corporate online bookings. Traveler protection services, Business Guardian, making sure you've got value of your money in your bookings. Very much innovation. So they say the online corporate travel booking tool for everything you need and nothing you don't want. No hidden fees, they say. So online booking tool, thank you, Ticket Pro Travel. And we've got SmartTab, Ticket Pro SmartTab. The SmartTab system includes key features like comprehensive route management, flexible passenger and payment solutions, flexible road and fare product setup, shift and dispatch management, cashier system, inspection tools, and comprehensive MIS reports, management information system reports. Thank you, SmartTab. JC Auditors. Don't know if there's somebody from JC Auditors who want to say a few words. So they are SANA's accredited certification body providing internationally recognized certifications. Compliance so important in today's world. Thank you very much, JC Auditors. University of Johannesburg, Prof. Jackie Walters, Prof. Nadine Pisa, and also a lot of mentoring myself. The Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management, they've actually been part of the Transport Forum since the very start of this initiative 15 years ago. Let's go. So they say choose between internationally recognized CLT diploma or certificate in the field of transport and logistics. And there's the contact information. Obviously, the link is on the Transport Forum's website. Thank you, Bisco, for your excellent gold sponsorship. We really appreciate that. Birthday Cargo. Birthday Cargo fulfills the needs of the express cargo industry for daytime and overnight cargo capacity across a comprehensive Southern and Eastern Africa footprint. Thank you very much, Birthday Cargo, for your gold sponsorship. Zutari, consulting engineers, somebody from Zutari perhaps. I'm doing lots of work this morning again. Zutari, previously known as Oricon, consulting engineers of note. Thank you for your gold sponsorship. You've got Ability, that say the human face of insurance. Thank you very much, Ability. Envy Risk Services, one of the largest independent brokers offering personal, business, and specialized risk and insurance advisory services. Thank you, Envy. Unitrans. Guys, you're welcome to interrupt me should you want to say a few words. Unitrans Supply Chain Solutions, innovation, expertise delivered. The leading provider of integrated transportation, warehousing, and supply chain-based services to customers with a variety of needs, offering bespoke value propositions in each segment. Thank you, Unitrans. Standard Bank. Kathy, you want to say a few words about Standard Bank?
Yes, thank you, Harry. And a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so looking forward to this particular session, this event. And I think it's because it is very much similar to what Standard Bank is evolving into. We've become a platform business, and essentially, if you're looking at the two case studies, one specifically, which I'm so excited about, is the Loop 6061 that's going to be presented. It absolutely resonates with where we're going as Standard Bank around becoming a platform business, and we're going to become, obviously, an integrated solution for customers, and we're eventually going to have almost like a virtual shopping platform. So it's going to create great, I think, extensions linked to what this particular session is about. And then, of course, it doesn't do any harm that it helps Standard Bank to be named the best bank in 2021 in South Africa and in Africa. So I think what we're doing is we're on track. We support industry initiatives, and I'm very excited. I can't wait for Gary and the team to take us through some of the case studies, and we're very excited around this event. Thanks, Harry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for always being on track with the Transport Forum and a lot of mentoring to myself. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much, Kathy and Standard Bank. Cuba, transforming ticketing. Somebody from Cuba? So they're part of the ICM Mobility Group, which enables public and private transport to move into the digital era. Journey planning, smart ticketing, streamlining electronic payment, shaping the digital transformation of the mobility sector. Excellent company, delivering lots of the integrated ticketing solutions in South Africa. Easy Clear, somebody from Easy Clear. Software solutions for customs clearing, freight forwarding, and logistic providers covering air, sea, road, and rail. Thank you, Easy Clear, for your gold sponsorship. Abunya Capital, Abunya, we see the Majola and team. They Public Transport Knowledge Hub, Bespoke Taxi Industry Insights, Integrated Public Transport Network Advisory, and Public Transport Thought Leadership. Thank you, Fuji, for your support. So there are our sponsors and alliances. And let's give a big hand to all these people making the Transport Forum possible so that we can have all this information free of charge. Thank you so much for your kind support. Just to refresh your mind of the business directory, ladies and gents, we're getting so much good feedback of this well categorized business directory where you can have your company listed for only 450 rands per year. You can see there's Olga's telephone number. You can take a picture of the screen, contact her, and she will help you to get your company listed. This business directory has been outsourced to Olga, and the company has a BE initiative with the Transport Forum, and it's very popular. So all the presentations you see here today presented, those that's been made available, as well as those presented over the past 15 years, will be available on this Transport Forum website for download. The thing is, you need to log in to access the presentations. And that is at the bottom, at the left of your screen, you'll see there's a user login username and password. Should you not have an account yet, you can create your own complimentary account by selecting sign up. And once you've signed up, then you can use your own username and password, and you should see then the menu events, and you go to downloads. And once you're in downloads, you will see a little simple little search engine, but very powerful. There's two ways you can search for content. The top field is you can type in a person's surname or a topic like logistics or whatever, and you need search, and it will search through all the 15 years of presentations. Or you can go to category and you can select today's date, for example, and hit search, and bring up all the presentations presented on that specific date, and you can download them all sponsored by our sponsors. So now the fun should start. We've got our two prizes that's to be won. And the first one now is the notebook stand. So we're going to ask a question, and you should now go to the chat room. And the first person that answers the question correctly in the chat room will be the winner of the prize, respectively. So let me just quickly get our sponsors up again. There's the sponsoring companies. And I'm going to ask a question and then keep an eye on the chat room to see who's the winner of the first prize. Just sorting my screen out here. Okay, so the first question for that laptop stand. Here's the question, and post your question in the chat room. Should you be involved in the express logistics industry, of which association should you become a member of? There we got Mandy. Congratulations. Mandy is the winner of that one. Congratulations, Mandy. We will courier your prize to you in the next day or two. All right, so the next one then is for the magnetic holder in your car. There is the question. Let's see who answers this correctly. Which organization fulfills the express cargo industry for daytime and overnight cargo capacity across a comprehensive Southern and East Africa footprint? All right, it's close, but I'm still looking for the full name. There we go. The side, very congratulations, you've won the prize. The side Surveyor, we will courier your prize to you. Congratulations. So that was now a lot of fun. Now let's go back to our program, ladies and gents, and I would like to introduce you to our host for today. That is Mr. Gary Marshall. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Express Parcel Association, SAPA. And he's going to do the official welcome and the keynote address. And he's going to give us an overview of the South African express parcel industry. Thank you very much, Gary. Gary, just remember to unmute.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you, Harry, and welcome everybody. And Harry, thank you once again for providing the entire logistics and supply chain industry with such a valuable forum. I think, you know, as you can tell from all the gray hair, I'm kind of the grandfather of the courier industry. And I've been involved with SAFER since its inception in 2004. And so I'm very fortunate in that I get to regularly, several times a day, interact with people from all walks of life in the express industry, from CEOs, board members, executives, managers, operations people, salespeople, couriers. I'm talking about courier drivers, the people that make things happen in the industry. I'm so fortunate in that I get to interact with them, and I get a sense of what's going on in this very vital industry. And today's program is quite interesting because the thread, if you have a look at it, that runs through a lot of it, is kind of generated by this great disruptor called COVID. And so we're still in that phase right now. We're not out of COVID at all. And we're not near, and I don't think there's such a thing as a new normal. I mean, there's today's normal, which might be different to tomorrow's normal. And so we've had to adapt. And so you're seeing right across the sort of spectrum of our businesses, we're having to change the way that we're doing things. We're having to think differently. So the lineup today, I mean, one of the key issues in our industry is the professionalization of the industry. And so Martine and Nicole will present something on the skills development side. It's really critical for us. We've got Brad Edwards from DHL talking about international and local trends, and specifically in the way that it affects customers. And then we've got Diedrich Stopper, and Diedrich is actually going to be presenting from Cape Town because he's down there. There's an e-com conference down there, and Diedrich is one of the speakers there as well. So he'll be joining us just to talk about e-commerce, and particularly about the challenges around e-commerce deliveries. And then an interesting one, Reino Becker will talk about the 60/60 on demand between the partnership between RTT and Checkers, which you all know about. And if you think about it, this is a radical shift. If you had asked me, and I've been in this industry now, you won't believe it, nearly 50 years, or maybe you will believe it when you look at me, but I think it's a radical shift. If you'd asked me a year ago, 2 years ago rather, would a company like RTT be involved in delivering groceries on motorcycles? Now, RTT has thousands of trucks. You see them on the road, large vehicles, interlinks, bin-type trucks, 4-tonners, 8-tonners, and of course, 1-ton delivery vehicles. But if you'd asked me, would RTT be delivering groceries on motorcycles, I would have laughed at you. And here today, we see a bit of a case study on the 60/60 story. Fascinating. Diedrich at Skynet, who's presenting on e-com, will talk about that. I mean, that is a fundamental, radical shift for our industry. And to some extent, it's a savior for our industry, because when COVID hit, a lot of the traditional businesses started to shut down as every country went into lockdown. And we were very instrumental, along with a lot of people in the e-commerce environment, to getting government to lift restrictions on e-commerce to allow us to deliver to people's homes. And what's come out of that is actually a massive stream, volume, revenue stream for our industry. So we're seeing these kind of shifts. Along the way, we also have regulatory changes that are taking place. And Elliot Maleme will talk a little bit about dangerous goods. It's a big issue, particularly from an air freight perspective. And there's a new kind of impetus being put onto this by civil aviation, and not only our civil aviation, but civil aviations around the world, headed up by ICAO. And it's also spreading into road, you know. So in the discussions we have with the Department of Transport, starting to take much more seriously dangerous goods as moving by road. And then Jason Blackman will talk a bit about customs trends around e-commerce and preferential trade agreements and so on. Jason's a real fundi in this regard, and always puts together a very interesting presentation. But from my perspective, talking about the state of the industry, this is to give you some glimpse of the various things that are going on in our industry. It's not by any means comprehensive. And so I had prepared a presentation, which I then had to radically change after I started to see the presentations coming through from the various people, because I had little bits of each one in my own presentation, trying to present to you what the state of this industry is. As I say, I had to change it. So what I decided to do is actually take you a little bit backwards into some of the history of the industry, and then from there walk us forward more or less to where we are today. So if I can just share my screen and hope this goes okay, Harry. Where is it now? Harry, we had it earlier. Where has it gone to? Can you see that?
No, Gary, not yet.
Anything there?
No, Gary. The blue share screen at the bottom of your screen, have you selected that? After green share screen option.
Yeah, I did.
There we go, just presentation mode.
Okay, can you see that?
Gary, we're seeing the presenter's deck and not the slide deck. If you go to display settings and just swap the views.
No, I'll tell you what, Harry,
Yeah,
I'll put it on my screen. You can see that one?
Yes, I click there, yes. Still we're seeing the presenter view. We can see the slide, so we can just see the next slide as well. If you go to the top, display settings at the top. Display settings at the top there.
I can't see any settings at all. Display settings.
Swap there, that's it. Let's select that one. There we go.
Okay.
Excellent.
You got it. Okay.
Yes.
So I think it's an industry which has really grown out of almost an emergency situation to where you needed to move stuff for emergencies into a much more regular supply chain component. And so what we're finding, and you'll hear this later on, is that as the world currently gets squeezed, you're seeing, continued lockdowns, particularly in China. You're seeing disruptions all over the place with wars. You're seeing in our country floods, unrest. All of these things disrupt normal supply chains. And what that tends to do is it tends to move. It needs to move product faster because they're being held up in the conventional supply chains. So we're seeing quite interesting growth, which I'll touch on just now. And I think just to give you an idea, the word courier comes from the Latin word courier. Forgive my pronunciation there, but it means to run. And that kind of gives you an idea of where we come from. And so there's a long history. I mean, ancient records show that the first organized courier services were done in Egypt in 2400 BC. And runners actually had slates, stone slates, where messages were hammered, chipped out of those, and they carted those from one point to another. And these are all just fun stuff, I must tell you. As a marathon, It's 26 miles long because of a courier in ancient Greece. So a guy called Diedrich ran this distance, that's the 26-mile distance, from Marathon in Greece to Athens in Greece to spread the news that the Greeks were victorious over Persia in the Greco-Persian War. So that's where the marathon comes from. And of course, marathon becomes an interesting part of the Olympic Games. So I guess couriers, we played an interesting role in history going back. And of course, in Persia, now Iran, around 400 BC, Prince Cyrus the Younger enlisted runners and used homing pigeons and men on horseback to deliver important messages throughout his kingdom and beyond. And eventually, of course, horses replaced couriers on foot because they were stronger and faster. And the Greeks and Romans made courier by horse and by chariot the most common delivery method. Being a courier is amongst the earliest professions. It's not the oldest profession. You know what that is. I sometimes wonder about this. Being a courier became a vocation by the Middle Ages, so it became a real job. So when Martin presents on skills development, if you can understand, this has its foundation in the Middle Ages. And the royal courts paid couriers wages to deliver their parcels. But there weren't any real formal courier companies until the mid-1800s in the US, and a company called Wells Fargo, which was also a bank, and you may remember there are stagecoaches and so on for that Wells Fargo were running. It wasn't very reliable. It didn't really operate on time. It was a passenger service. It became eventually the US mail's official mechanism for moving mail. So mid-1800s, but it was really transformed by an organization called Pony Express. And Pony Express was a courier service operating at the start of the Civil War and during the California Gold Rush, where things were really happening fast in the States. And it's credited for changing the speed and efficiency of delivery in America. And couriers were able to transport packages from the east to the west coast in just 10 days. And they rode on horseback rather than using stagecoaches. I'll talk a little bit about it just now. But I mean, there's an ad, which I'll show you just now, that said, actual employment notification. It said, wanted young, skinny, wiry fellows, not over 18, must be expert riders and willing to risk death daily. Orphans are preferred, obviously, because there was no family worrying about them. So we come from a sort of quite a dangerous kind of background. I always thought that's quite fun. And then, of course, as the world progressed, in the US, what is today the largest transportation organization in the world, UPS, was originally founded in 1907 by a guy called Jack Casey. And he partnered with another guy later on. And they originally started on bicycle and by foot delivering stuff in Seattle. And UPS grew from those very humble beginnings to the largest, not just courier, but the largest transportation organization in the world. So to give you some idea of the things that happened in the past, there were the runners in Greek. And in fact, Hermes was called the messenger god. Oh, that was quite interesting. We've got our own god in this industry. Messengers were delivered in Egypt. And various modes of transport were also around. So a camel was used in the Middle East. And interestingly enough, camels were used in Australia. You know, they've got a lot of, they can run for a long time, a lot of duration. They're strong and they can carry good loads. And then, of course, Pony Express and the various Middle Age horse-drawn couriers, and then stagecoaches with Wells Fargo. And today, a different scenario, of course. You've got these massive airline operations with FedEx and with the UPS and with DHL, and even locally, Bid Air Cargo operating a fleet of Boeing aircraft locally for the courier industry. And massive investment in hubs, parcel sortation facilities. And in fact, we've got a very good one here, recently opened up last year with DSV out on the R21 highway outside Joburg, a massive facility with all the latest parcel sortation stuff in there. So if ever you want to, I think DSV might be willing to do a bit of a tour for you. It's absolutely amazing. And then the changes, you know, in the bottom corner of this slide, you'll see the DSV locker boxes. The Courier guy operates a similar one. They call it PUDA, pick up and drop off. Starting to be, again, a real different delivery mechanism for parcels, because people are not always sure where they're going to be at a particular time. There are other options. You know about Paxi, which is the PEP scenario, where you can drop off a parcel and pick up a parcel at any PEP store, and that's been expanded. And then, of course, moving into the top right there is DHL with their electronic bikes. And of course, we all know about drones, a lot of press around drone deliveries. Quite frankly, drones we're really finding are fantastic when it comes to specialized deliveries into areas where vehicles can't go. And they're well publicized examples of medication being delivered in Africa through drones. Drones, again, it's an evolving solution. And I think going forward, you'll see them playing a much bigger role. And below that picture of the drone, you've got the DHL electric-powered aircraft. So they've ordered a whole batch of them, which are due for delivery over the next couple of years. So moving away from fossil fuel-powered aircraft, even beyond biofuel aircraft, into electric-fueled aircraft. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got UPS with one of their vertical takeoff and landing type aircraft. This is more of a drone at this stage, but starting to see real developments taking place. And all of you will have seen pictures of couriers walking along, or little robots going along on pavements in the US. We're a little bit behind that here, probably quite a few years. And of course, for us, one of the big issues in South Africa that we face is the issue of security. If you have a look at that top middle picture of RTT, they, like many of their competitors, like RAM, like DSV, have all got massive investment in security to protect, firstly, their staff, secondly, the loads and the vehicles that are carried. And that's peculiar to South Africa. So it's also going to play quite a big role in the technology that we use for the physical delivery moving forward. So you can see from those days to these days, a massive difference. I mean, FedEx and DHL, I think, are accredited as being the largest airlines in the world in terms of number of aircraft flow. I know that for many years, Memphis, Tennessee, which is the hub for FedEx, was actually the busiest airport in the world in terms of volumes moved. And I used to work for FedEx, so I've been there many times. And it's a fascinating sight at night to look up into the skies above Memphis and just see thousands. I mean, literally, it looks like thousands of aircraft stacking, waiting to come down and land to disgorge their parcels. Absolutely amazing scenario. So, you know, we complain in the industry, we think we have it tough. Well, I look at this poor guy on the left. I mean, he looks absolutely finished. And then again, that poster from Pony Express. Young, skinny, wiry fellows, not over 18, must be expert riders willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. The only thing that's common with today, they earn $25 a week. I sometimes think that's kind of what we earn in the industry, but I mean, I'm not going to go down that road. And of course, there's an old saying, don't shoot the messenger. And I wonder where that came from. So I often think that we should build into our conditions of carriage that the messenger requests that he please not be shot on delivery. So a little bit of fun stuff. And so I think, though, that's kind of ancient history. I took you up to UPS, where they are the original kind of modern day delivery service starting in 1907. DHL started in the late 60s. Originally moving architectural plans between San Francisco and Hawaii and grew from there. And FedEx started out in the early 70s, I think it was 71 originally, where their chairman, Fred Smith, who was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, finished, the war was more or less over in Vietnam, and Fred came back and saw a gap for the delivery of aircraft spares and saw that there was no system or mechanism to deliver urgent aircraft spares when they were stuck at particular airports. So he set up FedEx originally. I know their first night they moved 186 packages and now move several million packages a night through their various hubs. TNT, which was acquired by FedEx, that was also one of the very early express delivery operations, started in Australia in the 1940s. And it also originally used railways as a mechanism to move parcels. A little bit closer to home in South Africa, Adfreight was arguably the earliest courier company in the 1970s. I worked for them. It was followed by Sky Couriers, Sun Couriers, and of course, Sun Couriers bought Adfreight, they bought Sky Couriers. They're now part of the mighty DSV operation, one of the major, if not the market leader in South Africa. RTT started up in those times, the late 70s, early 80s. XPS, which was subsequently bought from the post office. And then more recently, one of our market leaders, RAM. So some interesting stuff. But I wanted to say to you that there had to be some foundation laid for this industry to become what it is at the moment. So it started with stagecoaches and horses and runners, and it went on to trucks. And then it went on to aeroplanes and all of the investment in facilities and hubs and so on. It got to the point, though, where the important critical change in the industry, from my perspective, they had built networks, global, geographical, physical networks for the delivery of packages. They were national networks, they were regional networks, and in many cases, the DHLs, particularly FedEx and UPS, global networks. And that became critical for the next phase of development of the industry. And of course, they had embraced technology. And what is really critical in this industry, because it's a very high volume industry, millions and millions of packages moving every single day. And the only way you can keep track of what's going on is with technology. So technology spend in the industry is very high. So if we go back to probably the mid to late 80s, courier companies had built these networks, physical networks. They had high degrees of technology. And that actually allowed them to take advantage of the just-in-time revolution. And that, for me, having watched this industry and being part of it for so many years, was probably the single major growth point. Up until that point, courier companies were really alternative post offices. They're pretty much the same thing. They did it better, they did it faster. Post offices around the world had really gone to sleep and hadn't woken up to changing needs, particularly in communication. So if you look at what happened in the 1960s and the way communication started to develop, I mean, most of you won't have experienced this, but when I was a child, we never had phones in our homes. And then when we did, we got party lines and all the rest of it. And suddenly the world started to change. Businesses had phones. Businesses could call. If you were in Joburg, you could call New York and order something. And the post offices were asleep because they were moving stuff by slow mail and so on. And that really created the opportunity for couriers to move in. But in the mid-80s, as just in time, which is really made more famous, I guess, by the Japanese, but the just-in-time revolution kicked in. And the couriers, now having had this mechanism to move product fast and rapid through these big networks and having the technology to keep track of it, really started to grow. So that was, for me, the single biggest change that got this industry on its feet, was the just-in-time revolution and its ability to take advantage of that revolution. And what just-in-time does, that it changed the supply chain from a push model, whereas up to that point, the supply chains were dictated by manufacturers. So manufacturers manufactured what they thought the market would need, and they pushed them into a supply chain, which was quite inefficient. It had warehouses and regional warehouses and national warehouses and global warehouses and warehouses on warehouses. Product sat in those warehouses, and they pushed them from those warehouses out to customers. What just-in-time did, it changed the supply chain, and it said, we're going to pull it based on customer demand. Of course, a key element here became technology, because for the first time, supply chain masters were able to start to predict demand more accurately. So instead of having product sitting in warehouses, and often, by the way, sitting in warehouses where the product was being made redundant. So you take, for example, a laptop. A laptop can't sit in a warehouse for years. It becomes redundant. New products become available. They're inventing new stuff all the time. So the old stuff, what do you do with it? You actually have to destroy it because you can't sell it, or you sell it on fire sale. So that old mechanism of pushing and storing and delivering it eventually was changed by the just-in-time revolution, where based on the demand of the customer at the point of sale, stuff was pulled through the system, ordered specifically to meet customer demand. That meant that transportation needed to be fast. It needed to be comprehensive. And so if you see that connection that I spoke about between courier networks, global networks, and technology, this was really the game changer. To give you an idea of size, I don't know what the global size of the industry is, and I've tried to research it. I don't know if anybody can even take a guess at it, frankly. It's really enormous. But just to give you an idea of the big three integrators. So DHL, and these are published numbers, pulled them off the internet this weekend. DHL released their numbers on Tuesday for 2021. They're an 81.7 billion company. That is approximately 1.4 trillion rand turnover. UPS's revenues for 2021 were $97.3 billion, or 1.5 trillion rand. FedEx revenues were 83.9 billion, 1.3 trillion rand. Now, those are just three players. Start to look at the thing globally, all the other operators around the world, in the US, in Europe, and particularly in Asia. And you start to pull those numbers through, it is a massive, massive figure. In South Africa, we estimate that the size of the industry is between 20 and 25 billion rand a year. So that gives you some idea. We're not talking about Mickey Mouse, those guys that were on horses back in the 1800s, the runners that were there in the years BC, laid the foundation for an industry which is massive. And I always think that if you have a look at some of the studies that have been done, and I think, where would we be without the ability to move product fast anywhere? And really, the industry designed around moving product globally within a 48-hour period. That's what everyone strives to do. So where are we now? Well, I think we're still in the COVID phase. COVID was the big disruptor. But as with disruptors, industries, either you changed and you modified the way that you did things and you adapted to change, or you died, or you just stayed still. So I'm very proud of the fact that this industry started to really take the bull by the horns. And if you have a look at some of the numbers, I think DHL reported in this last year 20% growth. That is during a year where the world was in pain. And now, of course, we're seeing the other disruptors having a big impact on the industry in terms of things like the cost of fuel, the Russian-Ukraine war. Not only does it have that impact in terms of the cost, but it also means product is going to be more scarce. And then locally, we know about the unrest last year. The current floods are having an impact on our ports and the ability to pull product through. You will be aware of the lockdowns in China and the situation around their ports. So a major global manufacturer having serious issues in getting product out, which means products are going to become scarce, and not just food, high-value electronic components. We see in South Africa the floods, the impact on the likes of our biggest motor manufacturer, Toyota, and how that's going to impact them. I'm reading an article about thousands of vehicles having to be scrapped. They're going to be scrambling for parts to get their supply chain, to get their customers satisfied and products on the floor again, and they're going to have to move it fast. So traditional methods of pushing stuff through supply chains are going to have to change, and certainly will change in the immediate future. And then, of course, there's a slight diversification where the industry has played a big role in terms of direct-to-customer shipments. So e-commerce, although e-commerce is often kind of misused and generally understood to mean home deliveries, it's not quite the same, but it's true that and in my view, just about every shipment these days is an e-com type shipment, because they're ordered electronically, they're processed electronically, they're tracked electronically. But typically, the public would see that as home deliveries. And as I mentioned, supply chain disruptions, all of these things that have happened over the last couple of years, leads to smaller inventory, smaller availability. So demand is there, suppliers unable to meet it. So industry needs to move faster, and our industry is poised and situated to handle those kind of growth. And you'll see a little bit, Brad Edwards will talk about that just now. And then, of course, the technology. I gave an earlier indication, the use of artificial intelligence, robotics starting to play a major role. So it's not an industry that is stuck in stagecoaches. It's an industry that has moved rapidly in terms of technology development, and billions of dollars spent every year on technology development. And of course, going forward, a big issue, because we are in transportation. We have massive fleets of aircraft, we have massive fleets of vehicles, having a big impact on carbon emissions. So the move towards electric vehicles, electric aircraft, biofuels, etc., are unavoidable. Fortunately, I think our industry is a responsible industry, and if you look at the major players leading the way, you'll start to see these become more prevalent over the next few years. In South Africa, we may well be behind the curve. I think with our electricity the way that it is, it's still coal-driven electricity. There's some question marks around the use of electric vehicles, but nevertheless, there are people that are experimenting with this. I think Woolworths is one of them, and DHL are one of them, all looking at these kinds of more sustainable mechanisms to deliver parcels. And the big thing that's changed, and I'm not going to say much here because Brad Edwards will talk about it, is the change that we've had to make in terms of customer relationships. It's very different now to what it was even just a year ago. So going forward, the future challenges for the industry, particularly in South Africa, a lot of legislative stuff. Some of you may be aware that we're involved in legal action with ICASA and the South African Post Office, waiting for court dates and so on massive issues which will have a big impact on our industry. There's all kinds of changes going on. The Gauteng economic act where the intention of allowing particularly under supported areas to have a bigger say in the economy, that will play a role in our industry going forward. But I think sustainability and making sure that we are responsible citizens and responsible global citizens are probably, big things occupying our minds at the moment. So that's kind of where we are. It's very light of where we've come from. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a different perspective of the courier or express logistics industry. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Gary. This was seriously interesting. We really appreciate this introduction, and obviously we learned a lot. Gary, I'm going to put up the program so that you can kindly introduce the next presenter for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. So the next presenter, we actually got two of them. They're both from an organization called Alto Training. And Alto was appointed by SAPA going back probably 13 years or so, when we started to look at how we're going to move this industry forward in terms of people development. It's been kind of like a hockey stick. So it started really slow. And what we decided there, and then Martin, myself, a gentleman by the name of Tony Delmado, who a lot of people will know in the industry, spoke about a virtual academy. And so that was the start of training and development for the industry. It's really progressed. It's very active. And just to give you an idea, Martine Marichin, she's a learning and development professional and has extensive experience in heading up organizational learning strategies and developing fit for purpose programs. And she's been involved in the industry for 33 years. So Martine, I can't believe that, because I didn't realize I thought you were about 34 years old. Martine has been a leading skills development. She's played a leading role in skills development within SAPA for the last 15 years, and she represents us at various private and public forums. And she's the founding member of Alto Training, and their focus is to formulate and implement training that meets the needs of companies and individuals to close the skills gap. She's really passionate about people development and providing opportunities to individuals to enable them to grow to their full potential. And our team is actually based in the UK. So we have an international speaker here today. Our partner in Alto is Nicole Pellet, who's got 17 years experience in the express industry. And over the last 10 years, she's been playing a role in as an education, training and development practitioner. She received a Youth Development Award on behalf of the Courier for her involvement in youth development, and was featured on the SABC education TV show Hispanic for promoting professional driving learnerships in the express parcel industry to females. And she heads up training at Alto with Martin. She has a love for people development and a drive to change and play a role for future leaders in South Africa. So Martin and Nicole, over to you.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Okay, is that good, Harry?
All good, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so the focus today is the state of the industry from a skills development perspective. And if we listen to Gary and the couriers of the old, of medieval days, etc., I think we've come a long way, although I think that some of our couriers today still face some of those dangers that the Pony Express guys faced, because I think that at times, especially depending on the cargo that they have in their vehicle, makes them, especially in South Africa, makes them a target. So yeah, I think it still requires danger pay in this day. But today we're going to be focusing on skills development and the current state in our industry. The Future of Jobs report for 2020 from the World Economic Forum confirmed that the technology adoption currently in the world is remaining constant at the rate that it is, and in some areas will accelerate even further. And that 50% of our employees will need to be reskilled by 2025. And we can be expecting that 40% of our current workers' core skills are expected to change in that same time period. So we can expect quite a change in the lives of our employees, and even from an L&D perspective of the way that we need to be doing things from a skills development perspective, with all these changes that are taking place. So who's going to be affected by it? Is it going to be our youth, as we refer to them, the under 35s? That is our target at the moment, especially when it comes to legislative targets and incentives. Or is it going to be our employees aged 35 to 55? Are they going to be the ones that are going to be affected and maybe adversely affected by all these changes? If we consider the trends that this report reflects from the period 2018 to 2022, we can confirm that high-speed mobile internet, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and cloud technology has been spearheading the technological changes in our organizations. The adoption of all this technology will definitely disrupt jobs, but it also creates an opportunity for new jobs, new emerging occupations such as data scientists, software and application developers, e-commerce, as we will see today as well through the presentations, and social media specialists. So there are also great opportunities for new emerging occupations. The adoption of technology will definitely also impact in the division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms. And from the reports provided, the research provided, it is anticipated that 42% of the task hours will be completed by, or performed, sorry, by machines and algorithms. So we need to start preparing ourselves in the workplace and preparing our people for these changes. These new tasks will obviously create a new demand for new skills, and we need to start preparing the workforce and to be able to adapt, or as Gary said earlier, it's an adapt or die, and it's our responsibility as L&D to start in preparing our workforce to be able to adapt to the changes and to be able to look at, or to be able to become lifelong learners, because as the environment is changing, so will the skills required to change. The top 10 skills identified by this 2020 report shows that 50% of the skills required for 2020 or by 2025 relate to problem solving. That includes, as you'll see on the slide, analytical thinking and innovation, complex problem solving, critical thinking and analysis. All of these skills that we need to assist business with, to provide that to business as L&D, as the learning and development departments or training departments. And how are we going to be doing that? How do we prepare our business for these future jobs? From our perspective, we're saying that maybe we need to look at looking at the 3 R's, and that's not the reading, writing, and arithmetic that we've been used to, but re-looking at things and reviewing, rethinking, and reimagining the way that we are implementing learning and development in our organizations. So reviewing current practices, are we doing the same thing every year just because that is the policy and that's how we've been doing things in the organization? Is it not time to review it, to look at alternative ways of conducting training needs analysis or skills audits? Let us start becoming more creative in finding solutions and a better enhanced solutions for the organization. Let's rethink about how we are conducting those skills analysis or audits, etc. We have in many of our organizations, we have our own data scientists, we have our business improvement specialists who are constantly looking at trends in our business, looking at ways of improving processes, productivity, etc. We can turn to these employees to provide us with the assistance of conducting or rethinking the way that we conduct our skills analysis. And then lastly, to find ways to reimagine or revolutionize skills development, finding new creative solutions that we can offer to the business so that we're not just completing that tick box, but that we are actually sourcing real solutions for our managers and for the world, or the world of work in the future, and for these future jobs.
So let's take a look at the occupations currently in high demand. A business improvement specialist responsible for process and performance improvement in the business by strategizing and implementing projects to achieve improved results. A data scientist, a word we're hearing more of lately, they collect large amounts of unruly data and transform it into a more usable format. They solve business-related problems using data-driven techniques. They look for patterns in data, as well as spotting trends that can help businesses. Data scientists use the most powerful programming systems and the most efficient algorithms to solve problems. A word that we're also hearing a lot of lately is the motorcycle drivers. We definitely have a shortage of licensed South African drivers. Current availability is foreigners with valid motorbike licenses. This is, however, due to the increase in on-demand and online shopping coordinated by express logistic companies. And then we have the sales representative. Gone are the days of coffee calls, as they were referred to as. The sales representative required in the express logistics industry needs strong skills in analytical thinking, complex problem solving, and providing innovative and creative solutions to their client. They need to be able to uncover other needs that the client may not have identified as a need. As L&D professionals in the express logistics industry, we have for the past 10 years created a network of L&D professionals which assist the industry in moving forward and trying to keep abreast with the changing needs when it comes to people development and providing solutions to the organization in our industry. This has been done through organizing framework for occupations, the OFO alignment, the updating of OFO codes, designed framework and curricula to meet the industry needs, whereby we created a specialization for business improvement specialists on an existing qualification registered with the Da Vinci Institute. Career paths designed per functional area in the industry are used for career guidance and training of our employees. We are currently working on linking programs, qualifications, designations to the various occupation codes within a career path in order to guide L&D departments. If you take a look at the current diagram, we've used the operations department as a learning guide, and SAPER has put this together really merely as a guide for the industry and also for new entries or new entrants of staff members that come into the organization. You could use this then as a guide, and each position is linked then to an OFO code. Along with that, of course, is if you've got your current employees that you would like to develop, you could then use this as a developmental plan for new job opportunities within your organization. For our skills development initiatives and how we're driving the industry forward as SAPER as well, we have successfully implemented discretionary grant projects as an industry to allow for access by small, medium, and large members. We assist, design, and drive special projects, applications to TETA, which we're currently busy with at the moment. And one that we're busy with is the Delivery Driver Motorcycle Initiative. Something that we absolutely love is recognizing and rewarding students at our annual graduation ceremonies. In closing, let us be part of creating the workforce that our organizations require to equip them for the future. It can only happen if we prepare for it from today. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you so much, Martin and Nicole. It was great presentations, and we're learning a lot from your people. So taking the start. And I'm quite sure that the audience will love to interact with you during the panel discussion.
Thanks,
questions and answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Gary. Gary, just remember to unmute.
Sorry. Actually, I was saying a whole lot of profound stuff there, Harry. You've all missed it, and I won't be able to repeat it. But I think, you can't underestimate the amount of value that Martin, Nicole, and the support that she gets from all the skills development professionals in all of our membership companies, that the role that they play in taking the industry forward, it's absolutely invaluable. And of course, it's a fast changing thing. So they have to be able to predict. So to some extent, Martine spends her life with this crystal ball on her desk and looks at it and tries to figure out what we're going to need for the future. So thanks, ladies. So our next speaker is Bradley Edwards. Brad is the head for e-commerce, express logistics and multinational customers for DHL Express in sub-Saharan Africa. He's Joburg based, and he's an accomplished general manager with experience in commercial operations, revenue management, and customer services. And he has spent most of his working career in business development and senior management roles in both aviation as well as in the logistics industries. And he's gained a sound knowledge of what it takes to succeed in Africa and the importance of leveraging networks and scale. Brad firmly believes in the mantra that people do business with people, and he really enjoys working with customers to make their lives and their businesses more successful. So Brad, I'll hand over to you.
Great, Gary. Thank you so much. Just wanting to present my screen. So if you just give me a second, I'll be able to do that now. Good, everyone. Thanks so much, Gary, for the introduction. Really do appreciate it, and thanks again for having me as an attendee and a presenter on today's session. What a great opportunity! I get to talk about my most favorite industry in the world, and that's the logistics industry. And right now we're living in probably the most exciting time and the most interesting time that we've probably seen in the industry, either for some time or ever in the history of the industry. And that's because we've had to deal with some serious headwinds and some changes in the industry over the past few years. Gary spoke about COVID a little bit earlier and the impacts that we've seen. We've seen some major supply chain disruptions, and ultimately our customers are the ones that have seen the major disruptions to their businesses. And as organizations that support these customers, we've got to be very nimble and very fast thinking in how we continue to provide those services to our customers over this time of disruption. So today, I'll go through a couple of slides with you that gives you a little bit of an overview of what our customers are saying. A little while ago, we did a little bit of a survey, and I'll get to it a bit later. But we reached out to our customers and asked them what their opinions are around the world we live in today and the effects on their supply chains and what was happening to their businesses. So I think there's some insights that I'd love to share with you with you that have joined this call, and we can take it from there. So first up, I spoke about the world we live in today. Well, there's a lot of turmoil at the moment. There's a lot of quotes here that you can see that I've extracted from a number of news articles. And this was in preparation to understand as a business as DHL exactly where we were over this COVID time. A lot of us were thrown into this new way of working. We couldn't, for example, have direct engagement with our customers, face-to-face engagement. All of a sudden, we were thrown onto more technologically driven channels like Skype, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, etc. And now we're having to navigate all of these very interesting business engagements in a very different way. And this was all because of the major supply chain disruptions that came through with COVID and many other factors that came through as well. And looking at a couple of news articles here, you can see that the world is in complete turmoil. And the interesting part that I found in looking at this is that it's not likely to normalize or change in the near future. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind as an industry. A couple that I want to read to you: the prospect of a return of 2021 supply chain problems fills companies with dread. Quotes like, it'll never normalize, or it'll never get better. It'll probably remain the same, companies that are locked into long-term freight contracts are in a lot of trouble at the moment. And companies need to, weather the chaos that we're seeing across the globe at the end of the day. A little bit more recent, and you'll see some of the quotes that I have there in a couple of the images, giving you some examples of the chaos we're seeing in supply chains. And this is where we're really talking to our customers on a regular basis, and we can actually feel the frustration that they have on trying to manage their business operations over these couple of years. The images above there, you can see, give you a little bit of an indication of what's happening in China. And anyone in the industry would be very clear and very focused around that, because I think it affects us all. And it talks about container vessels and congestions for container vessels or key manufacturing hubs as COVID-19 cases climb in China. Then we look at a couple of other ones here with regards to Shanghai, for example. An interesting factor or interesting news article that talks about Shanghai's seen as an 80% decrease in container pickups. And this is outside of the lockdown area. So again, it's very interesting how that supply chain web is affected and how it pushes beyond just the standard areas that we would focus on before. The DHL, for a fact, has been affected by this, and I'm sure so has any of the courier organizations across the world. And our customers are feeling it too, having to make serious supply chain changes in their business to make sure they look after their customers and keep their customers delighted with their services they provide. So just a little bit of insights. DHL, I think halfway through 2021, decided to go out to the market and start talking to our customers. So we have a very big focus around making sure we are in the face of our customers and we're talking to our customers on a regular basis, because our customers make up our business at the end of the day. And we approached over 350 global customers. We interviewed them in over 30 countries, right through to our multinational customers, our global customers, our consumer solutions and innovation customers, all the way down to a telesales customer or field sales customer, and tried to get a gauge of what our customers were saying everywhere in between. And we got a lot of valuable insights in understanding exactly what our customers were thinking, what their frustrations were, and what they were doing in terms of their supply chains to make the changes to continue to deliver to their customers. And I'm going to share a couple of those with you today here. So the first one, and the most interesting one, and one probably we would have all understood, is that capacity and pricing changes and challenges with freight forwarders was a main concern for our customer. And I think this is really important, as these issues, demands in the supply chain came through and disruptions came through, we started to see some very interesting things happen. Customers were starting to move from their traditional freight channels, maybe going from a sea freight option to an air freight option. And once that deluge of demand came through, a lot of customers started looking at, for example, a courier option to start moving their material in line with getting their products to market and available as soon as possible. So I think we can agree that that's probably one of the biggest issues that we saw, and we would have expected that kind of feedback. But some interesting ones that came through: scarcity in source of product supply. That's another one that's been talked about quite substantially. The increase in need for just-in-time and faster delivery. So that's where, from a courier industry perspective, I think we came to the rescue over their time of need from a customer perspective to make sure we could supply the goods that we needed. And then a need to work with different suppliers and origins. We're seeing a lot of the shift happening at the moment. In fact, as DHL, we're asking our customers, what is your forward view about your supply chain? What is your forward view about your manufacturing facilities and their locations? Are you looking at different locations in the future? Because that will then affect their supply chains, and naturally we'd be able to provide those services wherever possible. And then again, increased demand for customers overall. This is really interesting. Over that specific time, a lot of businesses did not do well, and it was a very difficult time for some businesses, but for others, they flourished and did exceptionally well. And we saw a lot of our customers telling us that there was a massive increase in demand overall for them. So the global shortage of freight forwarding capacity and corresponding volatile prices are key drivers for our customers to shift volume to the express transportation modes. And this is what we saw over the short term or medium term as this pandemic rolled out and supply chains were affected. One of the interesting things that we also found is there was an increase for a need for express shipping, but also for heavier shipments. And customers weren't looking at this as a once-off effect fueled by the pandemic. They were kind of saying to us that, hold on, there's some benefits here. There's some benefits here of looking at other modes and methods of transportation that could benefit their business, their supply chain, as well as their customers as well. And I think the challenges that came through actually drove a spike in a lot of temporary heavier shipping on those networks that we definitely saw from a DHL perspective. And a lot of customers actually haven't gone back to their traditional shipping modes. And that's because I think there's still a lot of disruption from a supply chain perspective across the globe as well. And then companies experienced an increased demand for just-in-time deliveries. We saw a lot of that from our side, from a DHL perspective, and I would expect that going forward we would see exactly the same. I think Gary spoke about it a little bit earlier, where he highlighted the fact that there's a bit of a change between having a forward stock holding to maybe doing a just-in-time delivery method for their customers. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. Our customers are asking around those opportunities that sit there as well. And then just that there's a lot of capacity and there's a lot of ability for your express courier companies to be able to help customers with heavier shipments going through on their network as well. And then I thought a very interesting one is just a bit of an overview of the air freight industry and where it sits today. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a bit of a breakdown of some high-level challenges and some air freight implications. The challenges being, continued difficulties in ocean freight, capacity congestion. We're seeing this all the time. I spoke about a couple of news articles in the beginning of the slides in the presentation. Lockdown of trade restrictions causing a bullwhip effect, fluctuating of demand and supply. So as countries deal with the issue around COVID and what to do and how to manage it, there's a lot of lockdowns happening, a lot of business, all of us are saying, wow, okay, we need additional orders placed and we need forward stock locations and holdings. This has created some warehouses to be completely full and a massive change in their supply chain and their history of what they've done in the past. And then less passenger belly capacity over COVID-19 and the pandemic. And I think that's something that we really saw in sub-Saharan Africa as a specific region. And I'll get to exactly what we did as a business to counteract that. But it was a major player in terms of the disruptions that we saw here as well. And then things like new rules by the International Civil Aviation Organization, for example, that require 100% cargo screening in the US. And I think Jason Blackman will talk about a lot of changes that are coming in from a regulatory perspective that are affecting our customers and the movement of goods that need to be thought about and addressed going forward. It's something that's quite critical for our industry. A couple of impacts, disarray in terms of schedules, demand changes. We see a big increase in e-commerce. We spoke about that a little bit earlier. So we see exactly the same here from our research. and a lot of medical supplies, a lot of PPE, and just medical equipment, ventilators, all sorts of things coming through on the network, and need and demand coming from that. And then tightened air freight capacity, slower recovery, long-haul passenger belly capacity absolutely reducing, because the customer carriers out there, or the commercial aviation carriers, reduced their capacity quite substantially. In the middle and on the right-hand side, a couple of key areas. I won't go through all of them, but an interesting one that we see from our numbers is a capacity decrease in the short term, and probably the medium term of around 28% in terms of capacity in tons. And carrier rates, very interesting, jumping up quite substantially, right, at about 73%. That is an estimate at the end of the day, but quite an informed one in terms of our research that we carried in terms of getting this information as well. And I think going forward, the traffic volumes will continue to grow significantly, especially to Asia. And you can see in the bottom right-hand side of the screen, a 60% increase is projected in terms of growth in freighter fleet up to about 2039. So a lot of focus around capacity and bringing that into the market. And that's to counteract the demand that we're seeing from our customers and what is happening at the moment. You'll see on the slides here, and you'll receive the slides, a lot of the sources for this information are listed there, so you can have a look at it as well. And there's also a little infographic that you can go onto from a DHL perspective to get further information as and when needed. Right, so from a key advantages perspective, and again, this is getting back to what our customers are saying, our customers appreciated the supplementary value added advantages that they got in terms of using our services over the pandemic period. And I think the first one that sticks out here is the customer service and proactive communication. This is the one thing that our customers are saying that they really enjoyed and wanted as much of over this period of disruption. And I think that really talks to the industry as to how we should be communicating with our customers. I think we need to be very agile. I think we need to be very innovative in our solutions that we bring to the table for our customers. And I think we need to carry on communicating with our customers. If I look at the industry as a whole, there was a lot of communication around disruptions and a lot of communication around transit times, allowing customers to really manage their expectations and therefore their customers' expectations. From a DHL perspective, we were very, very proactive in this regard, dedicated a website, constant updates on a weekly basis, and kept our customers informed wherever we could. The next one being service reliability. I think, on-time delivery is important. I think over the time of disruption, our customers want to be able to plan. They want to be able to have those conversations with their customers and have that, confidence that material will arrive on time and make sure that their supply chains are less disrupted by what has happened. From a DHL perspective, I was very lucky to be part of a joint operations center that was created. And this was right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic outbreak. And it allowed us to be very nimble in terms of two things. One was making decisions at a strategic level to benefit our customers and delivering on our promises in terms of our network, again aligned to the reduction of belly space and capacity across sub-Saharan Africa. But two was allowing us to make sure that we had a lot of information at our fingertips and ready to be able to arm our teams and to be able to go out and have those quality conversations with our customers. And I think that's something we must remember and something we must embrace as an industry going forward, is that I think a lot of regular communication is very important. And then price competitiveness and stability are very important there. In terms of those kind of rates, with everything moving and carrying on, it can get a little bit hair-raising for our customers. And then additional after-sale services, follow-up tracking, visibility of everything is really important. So advantages from an express shipping perspective, these are some of the advantages that came out in terms of the research that we got out of our customers. So communication and customer service, I spoke about that before, proactive communication, fast problem resolution, and coming up with different options for customers is really paramount and really important, probably the number one thing they spoke about as well. Service quality and capacity is, can you move my goods? And when you say you're going to deliver, are you going to deliver at the end of the day? I think it's really important in terms of service quality. and options to send heavier shipments. That's something that really popped out that we didn't really quite understand. Our customers didn't really know about our network, about what we can actually carry on our network and how easy it is to move slightly heavier things that you wouldn't expect as standard shipping to be in a courier environment. And then cost advantages that are probably prevalent right now in the industry with all of the turmoil that we see. For us, and then building on what I said before from a maximum weight perspective, I mean, we were very clear in terms of our communication to our customers around exactly what they could move, what we could carry, and why. And what I've done is just given you a little bit of an overview of our policies around heavier pieces. You can see the one piece limit is up to 1,000 kilograms, not something you would traditionally associate with a courier model. But at the end of the day, this is what we can carry on our network. And that has been a lifesaver for our customers. And they thanked us for us in a big way. Things like piece heights and up to 160 centimeters, there's practical reasons for those things, is because this is going in air freight. And air freight gets in aircraft, and they've got to go through cargo doors at the end of the day. So there needs to be some kind of management around those kind of things, and making sure that our customers are fully aware that these are the weights and dimensions that we can accept on our network. Shipments with a maximum of up to 3,000 kilograms. So that's one individual weighable, multiple pieces, for example, going up to 3,000 kilograms on a pickup from a customer. So a couple of interesting things here, and things that customers are now starting to understand what the courier industry can provide, giving them options at the end of the day on what they decide. On the right-hand side, our express pricing structure. This is what we can talk about as DHL. I'm sure that the industry is very similar. But you can see it's almost like a one-stop shop in terms of stable pricing for a customer. So this was really important because it allowed customers to really plan around their supply chains and around their pricing models in a time of disruption, which was really interesting. So a lot of this feedback I'm just sharing with you to let you know exactly what our customers were saying. This gives you another overview of exactly what the benefits are in terms of the express shipping solution. Things like minimal transit times. We all know that door-to-door delivery, which is fantastic. Customs clearance are included, fast speed to delivery, end-to-end shipment visibility. All of these additional benefits that you get in terms of the courier industry, I think is very valuable and very important, and something as an industry we should be pushing and reminding our customers on what we deliver on at the end of the day. And the freight forwarding, it just gives you an example of a comparison, right, where we sit. So from our customers' perspective, we seem to be seeing far more regularly orders in terms of those kind of supply chains around these kind of things, and from a courier model perspective, supplementing the options that they have. And I think another one here just says our customers are really starting to enjoy the benefits of express shipping. And that's another thing that I wanted to push here, is the fact of the matter is that their customers are starting to enjoy the supply of material, or their product lines or their production lines, for example, are starting to enjoy that material coming in a very timely manner, which is absolutely fantastic. Another thing I'd like to touch on as well is that I think the team, Martin and Nicole, spoke about this a little bit earlier, and same with Gary as well, is that in our industry, it's very important that we have the right talent in our industry. And I think our teams and our especially from a commercial perspective, need to have a status of a trusted advisor with their customers, right? They need to be seen as people that can really help customers in terms of decision making around their supply chains and make a real difference in terms of adding value. And I think this is really, really important. And I think these are some examples of what DHL has done over the past, making sure from packaging perspective, when that shipment is ready, it's ready to ship straight away. We're not waiting for additional information. We're not waiting for additional packaging, for example. There's a global customer guidelines here, very important. Jason will talk about that a little bit later on in the discussion. Very important that customers are made aware of what's happening. And I think we have a responsibility as an industry to make sure we're providing that guidance to our customers wherever possible. So I wanted to add that into the details with regards to this as well. And then I think just to summarize, right, a couple of key things taken out of here and a couple of key things that maybe you would want to think about going forward, right, is customers are being taken out of their comfort zones at the moment. We are seeing this. I'm seeing this in my role as a commercial head in our organization, is that customers are out of those comfort zones. They're having to come up with new solutions. They're rethinking their supply chains. They're coming up with alternatives, and they're having to be as creative as possible. And I think as a partner, we need to look at that as well. And then customers are having to be agile in terms of their business. I think that's very true. And we're starting to see our customers looking at things in a very different light. They're dealing with massive headwinds, capacity constraints, price fluctuations, fuel prices, for example, all sorts of interesting things that are making trading environment very difficult for them at the moment. And I think for all of us as it stands now. And supply chains are not going to go back to normal anytime too soon. So I think we are seeing some slight green shoots in terms of stability coming back. But as we can see from the globe, things are not back to normal. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime too soon. And at DHL, we firmly believe that it's not going to go back to what it was before. I think there's definitely going to be that new normal. And then customers are looking for trusted advisors. I spoke about this, right? We need to really take our customers' successes to heart in terms of everything we do. It's something we do from a commercial perspective in our organization at DHL, and I'm sure across the industry, the same is being embraced as well. And then the cost of shipping at the moment, right, is again something that is really, really hair-raising for our customers. And I really do feel for our customers because some of them have been caught very short in terms of their budgeting and their businesses. And there's some really surprising outcomes. I spoke a little bit about it earlier in terms of the benchmarking against a freight forwarder, for example. And as a courier industry, we need to look at those things, and we need to be able to have those conversations with our customers to make it very clear that we have those options available to them. And then customer service, proactive notification, and constant engagement. I think that's really key for our customers, right? They want to be kept informed. They want to be able to plan. They want to be able to manage their customers' expectations. And I think this is kind of my take on what's happening from an industry perspective over these very difficult times and over this time of disruption, specifically around COVID that we've seen before. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate being on the forum. And I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of insights from myself as well as DHL from a courier perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bradley. That was great and very interesting to see the new focus in the industry. What an important job you guys are doing. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to talk to you during questions and answers. Over to Gary.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. Thanks, Brad. A really great presentation. And just for everybody's information, I mean, all of these presentations will be made available to you, so I'll leave Harry to talk a little bit about that. But if you have some time, go along to the DHL.com website, and there are a huge amount of fascinating case studies on that website, surveys, vital sort of information, and really, really interesting. So they're an organization that spends a lot of time researching and trying to be proactive so that they're positioned correctly for these kind of disruptions that take place. But do yourself a favor, dhl.com, got good stuff on it. Our next speaker is Diedrich Stopper, and Diedrich is the sales and marketing executive for Skynet. And I've known him for many, many years. He's played an active role. He was director of SEPA. He tried to get out of the industry, didn't work. It's kind of like it gets in your blood. And Skynet itself is an interesting organization because it recently has almost done a sort of a backward integration. So Skynet is made up of, and Diedrich can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's made up of a whole lot of global sort of franchises. And South Africa recently has played a major role in acquiring Skynet, I think in the UK, in Germany, in Belgium. So we're seeing the South African influence actually going back into the global express market. They're very active domestically, very creative, and Diedrich plays a major role. He's a highly innovative and imaginative fellow. And Diedrich is actually speaking from Cape Town, as I mentioned, because he's presenting at the e-commerce conference down there. So, Diedrich, are you online?
I am, Gary. Thank you very much. You should join the Skynet sales team. Quite a good job you did there.
Yeah, and I'll send you the invoice there.
Excellent. Brett, excellent presentation there. Some really interesting insights there. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I'm going to go straight into my presentation. As Gary alluded, I am at the e-commerce conference here in Cape Town currently, and I have to join a panel discussion just on the other side of 11 o'clock. So I'm not going to use up my full 20 minutes, I don't think, Harry, if that's okay. The request was for me to just give just a quick overview of the e-commerce market as it stands currently in South Africa. I think in a lot of these slides, people have already given the interesting stats that the e-commerce industry has grown quite a bit. So I'm going to summarize it. I think I want to end off then just kind of what's the current challenges for the courier companies that play in this e-commerce space. But very briefly, thanks for the opportunity. Recently, a McKinsey report showed that approximately 300 to 400 million internet users in Africa that is actively buying e-commerce product, and by 2030, obviously the internet usage across the continent will increase. So the African e-commerce market specifically was estimated at about 4.5 billion already back in 2021. And as my colleagues have already indicated, this e-commerce market has shown massive growth figures, mostly because of the pandemic, and it kind of forced a whole lot of our clients to accelerate their e-commerce strategies. It's also said that if you don't have an e-commerce platform as a business within the next 2 to 3 years, and you're only focusing on retail brick and mortar, you'll slowly drive yourself out of business. The South African e-commerce sector is rapidly growing, more than it's ever been. In 2020, the South African e-commerce industry grew already by 66% compared to the previous year. And on top of this massive base, there's further growth. According to a Deloitte study, more than 70% of South Africans are now shopping online at least once a month. And there's some other stats further on that shows you the kind of growth. I just then quickly got, just for all of you folks, just an idea, firstly, where we were in millions in US dollars, 2.5 billion in 2017. And you can see how this figure has, obviously it took about 3 years for it to double, but you can see how quickly it's going to go from 2020 to 2022. Even on that base, there's further and additional growth. And then what I did for you folk is I just quickly gave, let me go one back, just a breakdown in terms of the type of items that the e-commerce guys are sending, and that's color coded. So fashion, electronics. This electronics one is an interesting one that's growing quite rapidly, as you can see with the fashion. The electronics one and the high value items one is a problem in South Africa. And you'll see in my last slide when I talk about what are the challenges, not just for Skynet, but for all of my peers in the industry and all of the competitors in the industry. Crime specifically is the issue. So as we see these high value goods growing and people ordering more and more, so do you see hijackings following a similar trend. And to that extent, what Skynet has specifically done is partnered with Fidelity Security, one of the largest security companies in South Africa. And we said something has to be done to reduce and counter the amount of losses clients suffer out there, not just client losses in terms of assets and product, but also lives that's lost because of hijackings. Because the syndicates get more and more organized, they get more and more vicious. So Skynet partnered with Fidelity, and we move all of the bulk cell phones now with cash and transit vehicles, with military spec vehicles in terms of the bulk movement. And then in terms of the single movement, we've also partnered with ADT, excuse me, to do home deliveries for us. So our EDT, as you know, they're quite a large security concern owned by Fidelity, and they've got over 1,000 vehicles countrywide that helps us with final mile deliveries, just to make sure that we add an extra layer of security. We've also recently introduced facial recognition at the point of delivery to make sure that if the item is sent for Gary Marshall, that Gary Marshall gets it using facial recognition through a partnership with the Department of Home Affairs. But you can see how the various goods are shipped, and how the e-commerce industry is literally every 3 years doubling already off a big base, albeit still behind UK volumes, Chinese volumes. We're seeing also more and more of the Chinese companies. Recently, Skynet acquired 3 or 4 of these large accounts, where they are moving the items, the e-commerce product into South Africa. And obviously that has a kind of a macro effect on our economy in terms of the folk not buying local product, obviously further affecting the unemployment in our country. You'll also see the food and that increasing, and that's obviously through the 60/60 innovation, and more of the Mr. Delivery type operators and platforms like Queens, and that we can go online and order food product. And I concur with Gary. If someone had said to me, 10 years ago, this courier industry will be moving food and doing grocery deliveries, I also wouldn't have believed it. But it just shows you we can't sit still. We have to do something different as an industry. And I think the industry in South Africa in particular, there's a few success stories of innovation. Yeah, at the e-commerce conference, we've seen some of the players in the market and how this conference has actually year on year grown. So much so that yesterday I think I had 8 or 9 staff on our stand, and at some point there was not enough staff to deal with all of the e-commerce inquiries at our stand. And similarly with some of our other competitors, that's also showcasing their companies and their products. So you can see the growth of this sector, obviously assisting us, specifically where other people are down trading because of the negative economy that we still find ourselves in. There's some stats. I'm not going to read through all of that, but more than 70% of the respondents in the survey done by some of these companies show now that people at least once a month shop online. And other folk, there's 27% of the data shows that people are now shopping weekly. And I think that's because of the 60/60 innovation and that sort of stuff, where it becomes just a daily occurrence now to shop all of your goods online, be it clothing. We've seen the liquor trade, high value shipments, food, etc. And then you can see the biggest reason for the increase is obviously because it's more convenient. And the second biggest reason is the obvious one. It was due to COVID. I think just in closing very quickly, I think the industry challenges, and it's not just the Skynet challenge, it's across the entire industry. Crime is a huge problem for us and for most of my colleagues in the industry. Hijackings of up to 20 to 25 per day just in Gauteng. We've got various crime groups. I'm sure some of you folk are also on these crime groups. And the hijackings it's not reducing, it's increasing daily as we speak. Even at the conference, speaking to some of the competitors, that's also showcasing their businesses. Everyone is complaining about the amount of hijackings that our industry is currently going under. And in Gauteng specifically, the police visibility and lack thereof is a major issue. And I think as an industry, I know the likes of Gary and other people have already started engaging. The Gauteng local government engaged SAPER and all of the SAPER partners, I think 2 months ago, well aware of the fact that crime is a big challenge for us. The N3, N2 and other major routes that's being blocked almost daily. We now have security companies like Bidvest, a security company, flying helicopters, Fidelity flying helicopters before our courier vehicles leave, just to check what routes are affected, and so that we can communicate with our clients and our clients of possible delays. And often where there are these blockages, you still have looting of trucks. We see it almost daily on the groups. The foreign driver tax, it's certainly not improving. These guys are getting more and more organized. There's a lack of intelligence, I believe, to deal with this. And the sporadic attack on drivers creates for Skynet and for our competitors and people on on the session, a big challenge. So I think we need to reorganize ourselves as a extended industry and create forums with government to say that if this carries on, all that will happen is that unemployment will just increase, and crime, of course, eventually will just get out of hand. The normal pestle issues, load shedding, we all know what challenge that has for us. You saw in the DHL slide the increase in cost for moving parcels last mile and otherwise, and part of this increase in cost is the fact that the cost to us operators because of load shedding, it affects your productivity. You move fewer and fewer parcels. The service delays to customers because of load sheddings and robots that's out is a challenge. And of course, load shedding for the manufacturing industry is a big problem. So that once again reduces volume and business for all the courier companies as well as for these clients of ours. So it has a major impact. The data networks that's down. Most of the drivers now have handheld devices and require some form of data connectivity. And in some cases, some of the load shedding that is not or doesn't have any battery backup. Your driver communication is a problem. The updates of clients' proof of deliveries is an issue. So that's affecting, I'm sure, not just Skynet, but the extended industry. The increase in protest I spoke about every single day on our security groups. Without fail, there's 3 to 4 different protests, sometimes as much as 10 different cities where there's service protests, where it's a no-go area, where the security partners will tell us, you can't go into those areas, you cannot deliver your clients' goods because of uncontrolled protests. We spoke about the unemployment. Obviously, the SAPA court challenge is a challenge for the industry, and also will be a challenge for the e-commerce industry. The e-commerce industry needs closure. Everyone is developing systems, and we need closure on this SAPA challenge so that these companies and ourselves can move on. We spoke about the protest action, the fuel price that's literally getting out of control because of what's happening in Russia and in the Ukraine. That is a challenge for us, and of course, it is a challenge for the e-commerce industry as well, because they keep on seeing the last mile cost go up literally every single month for the last 5 months. So they don't have cost stability. So logistics as a cost of a percentage of their sale is impacted, and you can imagine to try and forecast and to run your business where every single month there's an increase in cost. That's a huge challenge for the e-commerce industry. As we spoke to some of the big players in the market, at the e-commerce conference in Cape Town, most of them have complained bitterly about the fuel price and the sensitivity of that. Of course, we also know that a big portion of the fuel price is actually not the cost-driven side of it, but the government taxes that sits in the fuel price. Then, as far as the infrastructure goes, the potholes and the robots and the traffic lights remain a massive challenge for courier companies and last mile service providers such as ourselves. Also, it increases the cost for some of these SMEs that does deliveries on our behalf across the industry. These people, their vehicle maintenance and all of that is just increasing by the day. Taking in consideration the extra costs that they have to incur already on the price of fuel, and then they have to now still deal with potholes and traffic lights and all of those things. So in closing, that's the industry challenges. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Diedrich. Clearly, you guys are facing lots of challenges, and we really appreciate sharing that. We're going to do a questions and answer session now. Would you be able to stay on a little 10 minutes more?
I can stay on for about 5 minutes. I've got a panel discussion that's also live, so I can, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you, appreciate it, Diedrich. Ladies and gents, let's do questions and answers. Could all the panelists of this morning kindly unmute yourself and also switch on your camera? Appreciate that. Just bringing all the people into the panel. Bradley. Here we go. Ladies and gents, you're welcome to ask questions to our panelists. And the way you do that, you can go to the bottom of your screen. You'll see there's reactions, and you can use the raise hands function. Or what you can do is you can unmute yourself. I'll pick up that you've been unmuted, and then you can ask your question. Walter, I don't know, do you have a question? Walter Mzizi? Not okay. All right.
Yes, I'm here.
Walter, do you want to ask a question?
No, I didn't. I was asking earlier on if we were going to get the presentation. I've got the answers, and that it's actually live on YouTube. So that's what I was asking.
Thank you very much. David Flock, you're welcome to ask your question. Thank you, David.
Hi, thanks, Harry. This is just a question for the panel. I missed the beginning, so I'm not sure if maybe someone touched on this already, but do people see rail playing a role in their distribution networks again, given all the excitement about opening rail up to third parties?
Thank you, David.
Sorry, will rail play a role? Yeah. I think logically for bulk cargo, rail is the obvious solution because it should be the cheapest. We, as you know, without in any way trying to be derogatory, we have a real problem in South Africa. If you just look at it at the moment, I was reading yesterday, the coal industry putting on 400 trucks to get their products from coal mines down to the ports. So logically, rail should play a role. If you're talking about South Africa, I think we've got some way to go. The infrastructure is being decimated by theft. So they have some real problems. I mean, it's quite interesting, Dave, that one of the most prominent members in certainly in our association, and a major market leader in the country in the form of RTT. RTT actually stands for Rail It Total Transport. And they started their business originally using the railways. In the old days when the railways used to run parcel services and they used to co-load onto the railways. And they had an infrastructure, a domestic infrastructure in South Africa, riding on the back of rail services. Of course, those days are long gone. The railways got out of that parcel business, but it has played a role historically. TNT, in fact, in Australia, started out, and I think the name is Thomson Nationwide Express, and was made extensive use of the railways over vast distances. Nowadays, the rail, if you look at the resurgence of rail from a logistics perspective, in the US, of course, it is playing a major role. I don't think it has an impact on our industry because we're in a really different segment of the market. So it has no impact on us. But from a logistics supply chain perspective, it's absolutely critical. And in South Africa, the state of our roads, the cost of running by road, it should be a major lever to get our supply chain costs and efficiencies improved.
Great, thanks, Gary.
More questions, ladies and gents? I see there are a lot of people on YouTube. You're also welcome to test the questions. The panel, you can so long start thinking about your closing remarks for the first half of the session. Should there not be any more questions, I'll ask each one of you for some closing remarks for the first half. Let's just see if there are more questions.
I have some bad news. Sorry, Sir Dave, is your hand still up? Was an old hand.
Yeah, yes, sorry. I thought since no one was asking a question, I'd jump in again. Sorry. I think this question maybe is for Brad. You made a point around visibility, and my feeling is visibility is nice, but API access is better. Does DHL, expect to make delivery and transit movements available to users to automate downstream planning systems?
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? And that's why I'm giggling and laughing as you say it, because I think it's really important, right? And it's funny you say that. We're actually on a major drive as an organization is to try and get closer relationships with our clients where they can start providing us with electronic data. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, there's a couple of regulations coming in that requires that kind of information. And I think from a courier industry perspective, we will be expected to provide that quite early in terms of the pickup and the movement of material to the relevant authorities. And, you know, that should be coming through next year. So we're actually speaking to a lot of our customers at the moment to start getting electronic data from them. And that means system integration wherever possible, right? And the feed of that information. So yeah, it's a great point. And us as DHL is definitely looking at what we can do to make sure we're getting that information from our customers as soon as possible. This allows us to look at things like security screening, denied party, vetting and reviewing, as well as then starting to provide things to the relevant authorities to clear and to start transporting goods to the relevant market. So very good question. Something that's very much a hot topic at the moment. It's something we are focusing on as DHL Express with our customers.
Great, thanks, Brad. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, I think if I could add to that as well, I think critical in our industry is the planning of capacity. So if you looked at Brad's presentation, he spoke a lot about making sure that capacity is available, and it's a problem with the airline industry being in the sort of pain that it is at the moment, the reduction of belly hold capacity. And so planning of capacity is vital. And the more information you can get from your customers in advance as to what their expectations are in terms of volumes, etc., the better you can make sure that you've got that capacity available. So if you have a look at, you know, some of the systems that I've seen overseas, where as the request for pickups are coming in, so it's being fed into a planning operational sort of center that are actually saying, okay, we need to do this tonight, we need to do that tonight, in order to prepare for it. So there are so many benefits to downstream or upstream customer technology solutions.
Super, thanks for those comments.
David, if I could just add, sorry, Harry, if I could just add to that, David, you'll see my colleague Jason Blackman will be speaking a little bit later in the session today, and he'll actually talk about a lot of these focuses in the industry as well as what DHL is doing. So stay tuned for that. I think it'll be very insightful. It'll provide a lot of benefit if you listen to that session as well.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Brad. Guys, yes, thank you very much. I don't see any more questions. So let's have a look at some closing remarks for the first half of the session. We can do Martin and then Nicole and then Brad and then Gary, maybe closing remarks on this stage, and then we'll do a break. So Martin, I see we've lost Diedrich. So let's start with Martin.
Okay, thanks, Harry. Yeah, just to close off, you know, we're talking about capacity planning here, or planning of capacity when it comes to cargo, etc. And I think it comes back to what we're saying as well. From an L&D perspective, there's a lot of planning of capacity that we need to do from a human resource perspective, and ensuring that we are capacitating our employees for the future jobs, and that we get more and more involved with it. And our appeal really as SAPER is to say to the L&D professionals that are in the industry, you know, make contact with us, become involved, and provide us with your inputs and your feedback, so that at the end of the day, we are projecting the view of the entire industry, and not just those that are currently participating in our functions such as the junkets and other projects, etc. But here's to the future, and here's to us being able to plan and to keep up with the planning of what we need to do to be able to ensure that we have these future jobs in place. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, Martin. Nicole.
Thanks, Harry. Martin's shared the sentiment there for us all, but also just, you know, as we're all talking about the future, we know with the motorbike licensed drivers in South Africa being key in our industry, you know, we really do encourage involvement. We would love to network with the industry. We would love to meet more companies and start, you know, hearing other ideas or other thoughts, so that we can all collaborate together, because ultimately what, you know, we share together, we learn together, and we grow together. So it's very exciting times. the new positions that's out there and what the occupations are now saying in terms of where we're heading towards is we as organizations need to start thinking differently, and we need to start moving in that direction. So thank you very much, everyone. It was good to be online. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Nicole. Much appreciated. Brad.
Yeah, I think I just want to build on what Nicole just said. I think we do need to think of things differently and start looking at business differently. For me, in the commercial space of my organization, I'm a custodian of our customer relationships. And I've always believed that people do business with people. So, having the right kind of talent, having the right kind of people in the industry, knowing and providing a service to our customers as a trusted advisor, I think is critical. Over this time, it's paramount, right? With this time of disruption. I also think traditional ways of doing business are out. There's a lot more technologically advanced ways of doing business. We talked about information a little bit earlier and information transfer. It's something really critical within our industry and something that we must really focus on for the future. And thirdly, again, in my presentation, if you saw the slides, if you saw my focus, it's all about the customer at the end of the day, and it's all about our interaction with our customers, keeping close to our customers, and providing those solutions to our customers wherever possible. So that's just my closing remarks. I want to thank you for the session, and I guess Gary, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks,
Thank
Brad.
you, Brad.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. Gary, before you answer, Gary, there's a guy here on YouTube, Radar Skills Academy. They say, thank you for this insight. Our company is currently training motorbike drivers for the industry. How can we partner with industry to improve the driver development? Maybe you can spread some light for them, Gary, as well.
Sorry, Harry. Martin, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks. I think what we can do is if this person can get in contact with us, I'm sure Harry will be sharing our details, but it's martin@saper.org.za, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation on that. Thank you very much for reaching out.
Thank you, Martin. Gary, over to you.
Yeah, what I found really quite interesting was certainly when Brad was going through his presentation, and my view, having been in the industry a long time, of the one factor that gave us a real kick into rapid growth was the issue of what I call the just-in-time revolution. And I was talking about in the 80s when it became the thing. And of course, from just-in-time, it led into Six Sigma and Lean, and all of those were Kanban and so on. We're all part of it. But from our industry perspective, having had a physical network and the technology available, it really gave us a kickstart and differentiated so-called couriers from post offices. That's where we really started to deviate in terms of the services that we're offering. So it's interesting to see now, some 40 years later, that just-in-time, the need for just-in-time, playing a major role in the next phase of growth for our industry, as conventional means of transportation and logistics battles and getting product which is in short supply to meet demand, to move it rapidly, and our industry once again poised to take advantage of that. So I thought those were quite interesting sort of similarities. But thanks to the speakers for your presentations, really enjoyed them. I hope everybody out there did as well. And I guess, Harry, we're going to break for a tea break now.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you to the panelists. Let's give them a big hand for excellent presentations. We really appreciate that. Ladies and gents, we're going to now do the break, and just putting up our screen here that we can see the second portion of the program. After the break, you can see there's the program. Exciting presentations, 3 presentations and the questions and answers. Gary will introduce the speakers to us after the break. So I'll see you again at 11:30. We'll continue the session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harry.
Right, ladies and gents, let's take up our workstations again. Hopefully you've got a nice cup of coffee at hand. And we're going to start the second half of our session. Still proudly being hosted by South African Express Parcel Association, and we're talking about the express logistics industry and looking at the state of the industry. And I would like to hand you over to our host, Mr. Gary Marshall, to further introduce us to the presenters. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Harry. The next speaker is Reino Becker, who is the General Manager for the on-demand business unit in RTT. And Reino is a Cape Town boy, did his industrial psychology degree at Stellenbosch, also completed BCom honors and master's degrees in logistics, an MBA from Stellenbosch. Started out his career with On the Dot, worked himself up to a general manager with that organization, and was responsible for embarking on e-commerce drives and e-commerce fulfillment for Foschini Group, Woolworths, Mr. Price, Clicks, Superbalist, and Puma, and so on. So he's got a vast experience in the sort of on-demand sphere. And of course, the 60/60 product has really captured the public's imagination. I mean, there's been attempts in the past for grocery deliveries, but none of them have really captured the imagination of the public as much as 60/60, and the way that they do it, and the actual spread that they have around the country. It's been absolutely amazing. So, Reino, are you ready?
Hi, Gary. Yes, thanks very much. Can you guys hear me?
Over to you.
Yes, we can.
Super. Thanks. Thanks, Gary, for the introduction. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Right. Just checking. Can everybody see my screen?
All good. Thank you.
All right. Super. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, what an exciting journey this has been for RTT. Yeah, and as Gary had said, who would have thought that logistics business would do groceries? So, yeah, so there's a couple of things. So Gary has asked me just to give you an overview of the business itself and how it all transpired and where we are today. And it's also in the public domain that we know that there's the JV that's been announced between ourselves and Checkers. So that's some information that you'll probably see in the next couple of months coming out. But I think that's definitely a feather in our hat for the RTT team that a company like Shoprite has acquired a 50% in this new JV of us, which says a lot. And I think it's very, very exciting times for the two business units to come together and say, listen, how do we embark and make this even a more exciting sort of service and industry that we play in. So just maybe some very high level, just obviously, and there are certain information that's very much sensitive information, and please do respect it. I can't share all the information with you, but I'm just going to give you an overrun of how it all came about and where we are today. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the need for innovation. I think all the previous presenters has mentioned this, that for our industry to go forward, we need to be innovative in our offerings and our services for our stakeholders, for our customers, our clients' customers, and etc. I'll give you a sort of a deep look into what it is that we actually offer. The technology, obviously, that's key critical, not only in the on-demand space, but I think for all supply chain logistics companies that's out there, because ultimately it enables you to offer the service that your clients require. And just maybe just a high level, just some outcomes and achievements, some numbers that we can share. All right. So first of all, the need for innovation. So we started off with this with understanding what is happening in the e-commerce space. And obviously, the e-commerce space, we all know in South Africa, but obviously the international trends is always a couple of years ahead of us in South Africa. But what we've seen is how the e-commerce has grown internationally, and we all know then that comes down to South Africa. And what we've seen with the e-commerce, with the likes of a Takealot and the bigger e-commerce players, that the demand was there, and it was for us to understand how can we as an RTT organization maybe do a more in-depth sort of research on the e-commerce and what it is that we can do. So a couple of our people went to the States, had a look at what it is happening in the States on the e-commerce, especially, and then also on the grocery sort of offering that were there. But for us, it's critical in the e-commerce space. Obviously, it needs to be convenient, and it needs to be fast, and it needs to be reliable. Without those things, you can have all the best tech out there, but if you're not reliable, you've missed the boat, so to speak. And then with every cloud, there's a silver lining, and we all know that COVID has most definitely contributed to the fact that customers needed stuff fast and quick and reliable. So I think the timing was also perfect. The technologies that's out there, unfortunately in South Africa, and it's just the nature of the beast that we're dealing with, but the technology that we currently have in South Africa wasn't at the point in the on-demand space and the e-commerce space wasn't always reliable and consistent. So for us was key critical to invest into certain technologies in order to enable our business to take it forward and offer the on-demand service. We always try to innovate, even now with our own platforms that we've got. It's not to say we've arrived, so to speak. We always try to improve our service and to be innovative. And again, the tech needs to allow us to innovate and offer those services. Yeah, and then we said, listen, all good and well. Now you've got all of this. We've got the research, we've got the clients, and we've got the tech. But what is it we want to stand for? And I think it's key critical that we want to be the best with a world-class delivery experience. Our aim has always been that doesn't matter whether it's Paul or Pete that's delivering the order, the experience to the end consumer must always be the same. So there's a big drive that the end consumer experience must always be of a world-class standard. And again, as I said, mustn't differ from whoever delivers to you. So how it started, as I said, we've done a bit of international research on the e-commerce and what's happening in that space. We sent, as I said, a delegate of people to the States to get a sort of a research and what's happening there. So when we joined with Checkers, and Checkers sort of said, listen, they want to start dealing with and want to offer this, there was a jointly crafted over 5 months. So it really wasn't a sort of a thumbs up, say, okay, let's just do it. There was workshops, and as I said, as you can see in the presentation, there was a period of 5 months where we actually grafted this thing and said, okay, but what is it that we want to do, and how are we going to do it? Because there's not only one party that's going to make this happen. There's so many different parties and stakeholders that we had to involve in order to make the successful story, as we all know it, as it is today. And then maybe just quickly, so we soft launched in July in 2019. That ran for about 4 or 5 months. We started with the 3 stores as a POC and ramped that up to 10 stores. Yeah, and within that period, obviously there was big learnings, and hence why we didn't go with a big bang. So okay, now let's open up the whole of the Checkers network and our own network, the RTT network. But let's gradually open it and take our learnings, because once we said, okay, now we're ready to roll, let's open the floodgates. We had to make sure that we are in the best position to do so, because we all know. From an e-commerce perspective, once you've lost the customer, it's very difficult to get that client back because of the experience. If once you've made a error or a boo-boo on the service that the consumer got, it's very hard to get him back. And there's so many players in the industry that the clients just pop in or jump from one website to the other just to get the best deal that's out there and also what the service is about. So yeah, it was key critical for us to take those learnings before we actually said, okay, we feel comfortable to roll. Right, and then maybe just a quick look. So when we set the solution, we have 5 components when we said, okay, for the on-demand to work, because we don't only have checkers as client, we've got other verticals that we also play in, and I'll share that with you. But the first of all was the planning solution. What does this do? The planning solution is we get the volumes from our various clients, we put it into what we call a solver solution, and this solver solution is integrated into real-time traffic updates. So we know exactly at any given point of time, once we get an order, what's the ETA to that end consumer. The planning solution also allows us to roster the drivers, because they're all independent contract drivers, but we roster them to work on certain days and certain hours for the week. So we know, given the input that we've been given by our clients, that we know how many drivers we should source for the day or roster for the day. So that's key critical for us, and that's a starting point. Because if you don't have the planning in place, doesn't matter how many drivers you have, you're going to create chaos. Secondly is the order management system. So we've got different fleet types out in the network. There are bikes, there's cars. We're also looking at alternative sort of fleet types that's available to us. But essence, what this means is that it works on a principle of the business rules and whatever we've agreed with our clients. So it's sort of if you can imagine a normal hose pipe, orders coming through the hose pipe, and then we have to allocate the orders to the various service types and agreements that we have with our clients. So it's the orders come in as a sort of a FIFO principle, and then we allocate the orders to the various types of fleet types, and making sure that we have to adhere to those SLAs. And then with that order management system, we also have the back office, because the back office is ultimately is the team that looks after the orders in that pipeline that's coming through. So we've got a good view, even with orders that's been placed for a delivery, say in the afternoon, say between 3 and 4, we've got full visibility of that order already, so we can plan accordingly. And the back office, or the controllers, as what we call the team, they monitor these orders and make sure that the orders are allocated to the respective drivers, so that they can actually make the delivery in that ETA that we've committed to. Fourth one is the APK, what we call the APK. That's just a normal application whereby it's on an Android device. It allows the drivers actually to go and deliver the orders. So we push it with our system onto the driver's device. He sees there's an order for him. He knows where to collect the order from. He goes and scans, or whatever he does, type in OTP numbers, whatever the requirement from our clients are. He scans it, and then once he's done with his collection, get onto his bike or in his vehicle, and then Google Maps will direct him to that address. Yeah, so, and again, the backend that the driver reaches certain geocodes, which is the location that he actually have to deliver, can confirm real time when orders are completed. So those of you that use the 60 app, you would see that once it's delivered and the parcel has been handed to you, you will get immediate EPOD, electronic proof of delivery. So that was obviously key critical, and then obviously you can do the tipping afterwards, etc. And then obviously to manage this whole thing, obviously there's the dashboards, the information. You can only be as good as the info that you have at hand, and make the right calls and make the right decisions. So there's a hell of a lot of dashboards and information that's available to our operating teams sitting across the country. But for them to make certain calls at certain times, so events such as strikes, or what we had now in KZN with the flooding, as to how do we manage that and inform the various customers that, listen, your order is not going to be on time because of road closure or whatever the reason might be. But for us, and I think a lot of the previous presenters also mentioned it quite a bit, it's from the utmost importance that we communicate as much as possible to our clients so that they can inform their clients again. In the on-demand space, as we know that we've got 60 minutes, so it's key critical that you keep the customer up to date as to what is happening. And if there's a delay, that you absolutely communicate upfront as opposed to coming afterwards, oh, sorry, we were late on your order. It's all about managing the expectation of the client. Yeah, so the technology, so everything starts with the API. So that's the system that we use is Microsoft Core Network. This allows us to interface with various clients. It's just a normal integration that happens on RLA and integrates to the customer. And that allows us to get the economies of scale and work with various clients. So it doesn't matter whether you're on SAP or on of any of the other ERPs that some of these retailers work, we can integrate. And that allows us to have the agility and scalability that we operate in this landscape. Yeah, and then obviously, as I said earlier, the real-time driver visibility, that's key critical. Again, it's just managing the expectation of the client so that whenever they do place an order, that they know when to expect the order coming through and when it will be delivered. So, and then lastly, so clients using our current platforms that we provide a service for, there are 6 of them at this stage. Our average delivery time from accepting an order to actually making the delivery to the end consumer is on average 18 minutes. We are across 152 locations in South Africa, so we even in the outlying areas, such as places like Kimberley, Uppington, all the sort of the outlying areas in South Africa. Yeah, we've got 2,600 drivers, and then to date we've done over millions of deliveries. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Thanks again, Harry and Gary, for the opportunity. Much appreciated, and I hope that it was what you were hoping for, and that yeah, it's a very exciting time for our industry and especially for the RTT team.
Thank you so much, Rainer. I can testify I'm a regular user of this. It's so convenient to buy goods for my aged mother-in-law in the Strand, and I stay in Pretoria, and it's so convenient to get stuff to her. So thank you very much. A very good solution. And hopefully you can join the panel discussion a bit later on.
Thanks, Harry. Thank you,
Raymond. Gary, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Raymond. It's I think it's one of my favorite case studies. I really do. And simply because, I mean, the solution is fantastic. It works. But I also love the migration and the thinking that a company like RTT and the courage that it took to even move into this sort of unknown area. I just love it. So thanks very much, Rainer. So the next speaker is Elliot Molemi. He's with the Professional Aviation Group, and he's an experienced aviation security and dangerous goods consultant, and he's a SA Civil Aviation accredited instructor in aviation and security and dangerous goods. He serves on the Civil Aviation Subcommittee for both dangerous goods and aviation security. And he has been with Professional Aviation for 12 years in different capacities, but recently he was appointed General Manager for the compliance business. He holds a diploma in project management from WITS and a BCom majoring in law from UNISA. So Elliot, if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you, Jerry, for the introduction. Thank you, guys. Let me just share my screen. Share my presentation. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to firstly give a big thanks to the organizers of this event, which is the South African Express Parcel Association and the Transport Forum. And also thank you to the sponsors. You know, these events are very important to keep the industry conscientized of what is going on and to share information. You know, it's been a difficult 3 years, 2 years. Firstly, COVID-19, and then when we were in the middle of the COVID-19, we had the unrest in KZN, now the flooding in KZN, the war is going on in the Ukraine, the fuel price is going up. The economy in general is facing an uphill battle, but we all believe that we will carry through. So thank you very much to all the organizers and the sponsors. I work for a company called Professional Aviation Services. So what we normally do, is we are a consultancy mainly in the aviation security sector and also in dangerous goods, right? We help the industry comply with various parts of the civil aviation regulations, especially in the security and dangerous goods. Our client base ranges from, it's a wide client base. It ranges from airports, to security companies, airlines, dangerous goods picking companies, freight forwarders, and courier companies. So we operate in that space for those who don't know us. My presentation will focus on the proposed amendments by the Civil Aviation Authority. There's a new compliance pathway to dangerous goods that is on the way. So what we, forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, I have a little bit of a flu, so I will try to carry through with the presentation. So please forgive me a little bit. So the regulations at this moment, there's a new regulations that are coming in, but the regulations at this moment, they are still at the working group phase of the dangerous goods. So the working group phase, what happens is that there's an engagement between the industry and the civil aviation regulations, because of, you do not want to create regulations about the industry without getting the feel from the industry how these regulations are going to impact their businesses. So they are still at the working group stage. When the regulations are done at the working group stage, then they will move into what we call the Civil Aviation Regulations Committee. At the Civil Aviation Regulations Committee, if they are happy with the regulations, then they will be given to the minister to promulgate into law. But then if they are not happy with the regulations, they will throw them back to what we call the working group and also the subcommittee. So the regulations can have a little bit of back and forth before they become law. From experience, I would say the regulations are maybe 5 to 8 months before they become law. But then if things go quicker, they can be done quicker, but then we will see how things go from there on. So part 92, those are the regulations that we're talking about. The Civil Aviation Authority, which is a regulatory authority in South Africa on all matters of civil aviation, has regulations that are divided into different parts. The parts that we are familiar with as transport, courier, freight forwarding industry is part 108. We are all familiar with part 108, where it requires that cargo before it gets into an aircraft must be made known, right? So that's one of the parts of the Civil Aviation Authority. We have part 110, which normally encompasses the screening companies, your Bidvest, Protea Coin, your what's the other ones? Yes, I'm forgetting the other ones, but those screening companies that normally they use an X-ray machine to screen the cargo, or they use the dogs to screen the cargo. So those are the part 110 is covering. There's also parts like part 109, the security training of all personnel involved in the aviation industry. And the part that we are dealing with today is part 92, which basically covers the transportation of the safe transportation of dangerous goods by air. So what this part seeks to do is that before any dangerous goods, because of dangerous goods could be anything, you know, it could be the perfume that we normally use for household purposes. It is flammable liquids like petrols and diesels and paint. So those are the dangerous goods that we're talking about. But then part 92 seeks to ensure that before any dangerous goods is put inside an aircraft, that it has been properly packed, it has been properly identified, and all of those things are done before it gets into an aircraft, because of if they are not done right, the consequences could be dire for both the industry and the people who are inside that aircraft. Why these amendments that are happening? Firstly, is to align them with ACAIOS Annex 18, to clarify the requirements and processes for operators of DG approvals to carry dangerous goods. We will talk about those things later on today. Clarifying the requirements and processes for ATO approvals in line with Part 114, and clarifying the requirements for training programs. So that is what the regulations are there for, and that is the changes that are envisaged by the Civil Aviation Authority to make on those regulations. Applicability. So the first part that is going to change from the current regulations to the proposed amendments is expanding on the applicability. Who does these regulations apply to? So on the current regulations, the CAA has always been clear on what needs to be done with dangerous goods. But in most cases, it was covering dangerous goods once it gets inside an airport, you know. So the people like freight forwarders and couriers, they were really not inspected as much by the Civil Aviation Authority. So it was very clear from where the cargo it comes from and how the cargo is going to fly. But then on the in-betweens was not covered. So the CAA is seeking to cover the in-between. So the new people who are going to be affected by these regulations are the RPAS, which are remotely piloted aircraft systems. Simply put, in simple words, is the drones, right? The airports now are going to be covered. There are those dangerous goods testing facilities where they testing the package, that the package are fit for purpose for what they intend to be for them to carry dangerous goods. So those testing facilities are going to be covered by these new regulations. The packing companies, there are those packing companies, your Dangerous Goods International, your Hexagons, and all of those other packing companies. For now, they are not regulated by the CAA, but then the CAA is bringing them into the regime. We have shippers. This is originally where the cargo comes from, right? And the shippers is a difficult one because of in the freight forwarding industry, it's easy to deal with shippers because the shippers now could be established companies that you normally move from one company to another company. On the courier industry, the shipper is very difficult because of sometimes it's Gogo Dlamini from Hammanskraal, or it's when you look at what they do at Pep Store, you know, with that Pixie product of theirs, or it could be Tani Marie from Sentin, moving things on the Aramex, let's say Aramex Dropbox product. So those are the shippers, but it's a difficult one that we will have to, as an industry, as the Civil Aviation Authority, we must engage together and see how we're going to work with this one. And of course, there's freight forwarders now, they are going to be covered by these regulations, and we have also courier companies. Approvals. At the moment, the Civil Aviation Authority doesn't approve entities to carry dangerous goods. So it's sort of it's sort of a self-regulating thing that you must make sure that you do all the things according to law. But then what the CAA has proposed now is that it's going to approve entities to carry dangerous goods. So these entities, guys, it's ourselves, you know, from the freight forwarders, the courier companies, the ground handlers at the airport, and the airlines. They have to apply to the CAA to be approved to carry dangerous goods. The application will have to be renewed every 24 months. The approval certificate to be displayed in the warehouse. So once you get approved, you have to display a certificate in the warehouse. Back to that renewal every 24 months, I think it's a departure from what is the norm, because of these companies, all companies in different parts of civil aviation regulations, they have to apply every 12 months, but this particular one, the CAA, is giving a 24 months renew. I don't know before the regulations are published so that this will be changed, but I think this is welcome as the industry, so that you give us 24 months to make sure that, give us 24 months, unlike the onerous and sometimes cumbersome responsibilities of applying and being inspected every 12 months and so on. Right, so I really welcome this 24 months thing. So before you get approved as an entity, as an RTT, as a DHL, as a BDA cargo, or as a rolling green road, what needs to be done is that there are certain things that you need to satisfy before you get approved. And one of those things is appointing the responsible person. What is the role of the responsible person? Is to do risk management or safety management. The roles, I'll get to the responsibilities, but then the qualifications for this person needs to have a risk management or safety management qualification. So there has to be a qualification that also is recognized by the Civil Aviation Authority before you go and become a responsible person. All right, and you need to have what is called dangerous goods category 6 or an equivalent when the competency-based training kicks in next year, but that's another topic for another day. It will be spoken about in different platforms, the competency-based training. For now, just let's leave it at dangerous goods category 6. All right, the responsibilities of this responsible person, they will be responsible for the overall compliance with the regulations, the Part 92 regulations, meaning the dangerous goods regulations. And they will also be responsible for liaising with the Civil Aviation Authority. So every matter of that particular company, let's say an Aramex, for instance, every matter of Aramex between Aramex and the CAA will be done through the responsible person, just to avoid having too many different points of communication. So it will be done only through that responsible person. This person will be responsible for conducting quality and risk inspections to make sure that the company, to assess that the company is on, the processes in the company are on course to, well, they are compliant with what is required of by the Civil Aviation Authority. Reporting of accidents and incidents. So this person will have to report the accidents and the incidents and all other occurrences involving dangerous goods, because of there could be a spillage in the warehouse, so this person will report it to the CAA. The CAA requires that we report these things, all of them, for them to be able to collect data and see where the trends are emerging in terms of dangerous goods. So that will be the responsible person and his or her responsibilities. One of the requirements to be approved by the Civil Aviation Authority to carry dangerous goods is to draft a procedures manual or a dangerous goods procedures manual. That manual must be submitted to the CAA for approval. And inside the manual, you must detail all processes of accepting, handling, storing, and transporting dangerous goods. You know, so that is from, those processes that they must include from the point of collection to the point of acceptance, how you store it inside the warehouse. If you are screening dangerous goods, how are you screening dangerous goods? And then how do you have processes to detect undeclared or misdeclared dangerous goods? So you must put all of those things inside the procedures manual. Detail inside the procedures manual, the response procedures to incidents, including spillage. So in cases of spillage of dangerous goods inside your warehouse, how do you react to it? You know, or any other incidents, including dangerous goods, how do you respond to it? If it's something like toxic gases, do you evacuate the warehouse? all of those things. You must point things in the dangerous goods procedures manual. Where would your assembly point be, and all of those things. So it's going to be a full manual, right? Must be available to those handling dangerous goods. It is pointless having procedures that are not available to the staff that are actually working with those procedures. So it must be inside the manual, but then also it must be put inside various locations in the warehouse, or maybe in the dangerous goods area in the warehouse, so that people who are working on a daily basis with dangerous goods, they are able to know how to handle these dangerous goods and how to respond to any emergencies of dangerous goods. All entities who are handling dangerous goods will have to have what is called the dangerous goods designated area. I know many companies are already compliant with this, but it was not put into law, especially for those outside the airport. So now for those outside the airport, this now binds you that you must have a designated DG area, and all dangerous goods must be stored in that designated dangerous goods area. Inside that, well, the dangerous goods area must have things like a segregation table, and with the segregation table, it shows stuff what dangerous goods or substances that needs to be put separate from each other, because they might react to each other in cases of spillage. So they must be segregated. The segregation chart shows which ones they need to be segregated. And then you must have things like the hazard and handling labels indicating, those are the ones that indicate all the 9 different classes of dangerous goods and their subdivisions and how you should be handling them. There must be also the emergency response procedures and contacts also in that dangerous goods area. So in terms of emergency, people can know who to contact immediately. And of course, there must be a spill kit, but the spill kit with people who don't know how to use it, it's pointless. People must be trained in how to use the spill kit. South African Revenue Services. So there are instances where customs needs to open packages for various reasons and at various points. So, but then we will let SARS do what they're supposed to do by law. We cannot stop it. But then after that, if the package is dangerous goods, then what happened? Because from the packing company, this was packed by specialized people. So the regulations are making now provisions for people who are trained to the required level to repack those dangerous goods themselves. So it could be a person who's trained in Cat 6 and maybe extra courses on how to package dangerous goods and so. So the CAA is giving the industry the right to repackage the goods that were opened by customs for various reasons. Right. I'm not I'm not suggesting by any means that this is how your warehouses look like. All right. I know your warehouses are much more professional than this. But then those who work in the courier industry, they know how the courier warehouses look at night. Maybe especially for the overnight packages, from the time that the cargo moves in around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, to the time that it was going to go out to the airport around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It's chaos, but it doesn't look like this. It looks much more professional like this. Now, the problem is, what if there is dangerous goods there that is not packaged and identified properly? It's going to cause a whole lot of problems, because of mostly in courier companies, by the time it leaves the warehouse, it's in containers, right? And then once it's in containers, we are not going to be able to detect if it's dangerous goods or not. The CAA is trying to, well, it's coming up with a solution that wherever we're going to be picking cargo from, we must make those people who we are picking cargo from, or those companies that we are picking cargo from, to make a statement that there is no dangerous goods on the packages that they are giving us. Or if there's dangerous goods, then that dangerous goods must be processed differently, and it must be it must go through the packing, the proper dangerous goods packing way. Right, statement. So you must have a statement of undeclared dangerous goods. The statement will try to establish if any shipment contains undeclared dangerous goods. The person we are picking the cargo from must sign a written statement declaring that the cargo does not contain dangerous goods and must give us the contents of the cargo. If we establish that there's dangerous goods, then it must be processed in a different way that is go through the picking of dangerous goods route. So this statement is a little bit contentious, but I think the industry will find a way of working with the CAA to make that thing work for all of us. Reporting of undeclared and misdeclared dangerous goods and all the other incidents must be done to the CAA in writing within 48 hours. We have incidents, I think, on a daily basis of dangerous goods. We have shipments that are being stopped at the airport. We have shipments that are being stopped maybe after going through even the airport. I think last year we had a shipment that was stopped in Dubai. It was dangerous goods, lithium batteries, as they are becoming, as the world is moving in that direction of lithium batteries, but then they are also becoming a problem in how to regulate shipping them. So especially the electronics. So in this case, the package was stopped overseas. And then when it stopped overseas, the Civil Aviation Authority of the company of the country that they were stopped in is going to contact our local Civil Aviation Authority. And our local Civil Aviation Authority now will go to you as a bidder cargo, as the transgressor, or an RMX or a DHL as a transgressor, and say that what happened here, But then if you yourself find something that that it's not supposed to happen, or somebody has not declared dangerous goods to you, or you had a spillage and everything, you have a responsibility to report these things to the CAA within 48 hours. Another notable change in the regulations, but this one is an easy one, is the one that we have always used. Is allowing the IATA DGR, that is the dangerous goods regulations, to be used as a legal document for moving dangerous goods. Previously, it was not recognized as a legal document, but then the industry was using it. The legal document was only the ICAO technical instructions, but now this one is now going to be recognized by our law to be used as a legal document for the movement of dangerous goods by air. All right, food for thought, guys. We are all passengers in these aircraft, so I know the regulations can be troublesome sometimes, and then they are inconvenience, especially in the industry where we want to move something from point A to point B as soon as we can. But then we are passengers in this aircraft, and we do not want to be in an aircraft that dangerous goods that were not properly declared and everything, they are in there, and they can cause the aircraft to go down, God forbid, right? To me, dangerous goods is a more imminent danger than terror attacks, especially in the South African context. We haven't had an incident that we had to, our screening people using the X-ray or using the dogs had to stop at the airport. Actual bomb. We haven't really had that type of incident. But then on various and many occasions, we have stopped shipments of dangerous goods. So dangerous goods is much more imminent danger than terror attacks. A serious problem it needs serious solutions. So it is the responsibility of the authority, it is the responsibility of the industry to sit together and find solutions to this dangerous goods problem. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elliot. A very interesting presentation. I'm quite sure people would like to engage in the panel discussion. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing.
Thank
Gary,
you.
over to you.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Elliot. So what Elliot presented there might seem to people that aren't directly involved in it fairly onerous procedures, but I think what the aim here of the Civil Aviation Authority and those of us that are in the industry is about safety, and there's no compromise on safety. So this is difficult to comply, but what it does, it ensures the safety of passengers, it ensures the safety of crew, it ensures the safety of aeroplanes. And dangerous goods have been in place for many, many years. This is the latest revision. It's a new, a slightly different approach, and it's necessary, absolutely necessary. So thanks, Elliot. I can assure you, it's also a really complicated issue. So guys with specialist knowledge like Elliot are really, really invaluable to the industry. So our next speaker is Jason Blackman, who is going to be talking about customs trends around e-commerce and preferential trade agreements in Africa. So Jason, who by the way is my kind of go-to person in the industry for anything legal where I want a quick opinion. He's played an amazing industry role over the last few years around a number of legal issues, specifically around postal issues and so on. And he's been in the industry for 27 years. So no novice. He started working at DHL in 1994, and he held various roles from claims and risk management, export management, head of customer operations, head of customs. I know he spent some time in Australia with DHL there. He's currently the Senior Director of Customs, Compliance and Regulatory Affairs for DHL Express in Sub-Saharan Africa. He holds a BCom degree in economics, marketing and commercial law. He has a strong focus on liberalized competitive market environments and with simplified, transparent customs processes that promote and facilitate free trade. So he's an absolute encyclopedia when it comes to customs-related legislation and so on. And so I welcome Jason. Are you ready, bud?
I am ready. Let me share my screen. You had taken the screen over, so I was just waiting for you to finish. Here we go. All right. Right. Just tell me if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Harry, and the Transport Forum for the opportunity to share some of the information and insights that we've got around Africa. Obviously, I'm speaking from the perspective of being the head of customs and regulatory affairs for Africa for DHL. And the advantage we have, is that we're in a captain seat, so to speak, with a view in every one of the 51 countries we're present in Africa. So we have some unique insights into what happens in regards to trade facilitation and e-commerce and preferential trade agreements around the region. And it's a very interesting and dynamic environment, fast changing. The pace changes on a regular basis. It's speeding up now. We're seeing a lot more push towards e-commerce. We're seeing a push towards getting preferential trade agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement becoming something of a reality. You know, active trading was supposed to have started last year, for example, on the 1st of January last year around the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and yet we've seen no meaningful trade yet. So it's a very interesting area, very interesting dynamics, and very diverse. And every day brings a new set of challenges. So I'm going to chat a little bit about what the global trends are and then their relevance within the African context, especially around e-commerce and what we're seeing, not only from a DHL perspective, but also from an industry perspective, because we have a lot of engagements in regional trade bodies and listen to what the other parties are saying around the table. And so we're speaking with a collective voice in terms of what we're seeing as the collective viewpoints on the situations and based on our experience. Right, let's see. Okay, so in terms of international trade, what are the international sort of the international trends showing at the moment? Well, we're seeing on a number of fronts increased protectionist tendencies. So even with things like the Continental Free Trade Area in place, we're still seeing protectionist policies in place around Africa and around the world for that matter. We're seeing revisions of the minimus thresholds. Most of you may have been aware that last year in July, the European authorities removed the minimus threshold into the European region. So in other words, all shipments into Europe and the UK by that matter as well, now attract VAT on values up to 150 euros and duties and VAT on values over 150 euros. So the international landscape is changing. So the VAT de minimis in the EU was removed in order to protect local industries and putting them on a level playing field with cheap imports that weren't being subjected to VAT on shipments, for example, under 22 euros. We've seen the United States are also looking at revising the $800 de minimis. We've seen the Australians go for a e-commerce type of approach to GST, that if you're an online retailer, for example, selling goods of more than $75,000 to Australian consumers, you now have to register and pay GST at 10% on the value of those shipments that you're now sending to Australia. So we're seeing a lot more protectionist tendencies. We're seeing complicated trade restrictions, and I think Gary and I will both agree during COVID, trying to unpack, for example, the trade restrictions in South Africa during COVID was an art form that few mastered. And that was very challenging. We're seeing a rapid rise in e-commerce, and along with that rise in e-commerce shipments, we're seeing a concurrent challenge with the authorities on how to deal with that increased volume in terms of risk profiling, inspection management, and dealing with the duties treatment on those shipments. We're seeing increased awareness by companies and the public authorities of the need to be regulatory compliant. And so a lot more customers are approaching us at DHL, for example, for insights and guidance as to the regulatory frameworks that are in existence and control their businesses and their trade markets. We're seeing an increased demand for data, so a lot more sharing of data. And we're seeing globally networked customs, which means sharing of data and practices across borders are becoming more and more commonplace. Not as advanced as we would like to see in Africa, but certainly the initiatives are there and the intent is there to do so. In terms of customs focus areas, what we're finding around Africa is what are customers focusing on, especially when it comes to e-commerce, and particularly e-commerce from known origin regions that have undervaluations, is undervaluation of shipments, where the customers are deliberately undervaluing the goods to avoid duties and taxes. I've actually seen letters from e-retailers inside shipments that says to the buyer, don't tell the customs authority you've paid for the shipment yet, because you'll be forced to pay duties and taxes, on the assumption that if they say they haven't paid for the shipment yet, there's going to be no proof of payment, and therefore there's going to be no value validation. Intellectual property rights is becoming more and more important, and this is a big drive across Africa at the moment. We're seeing it in a number of countries in terms of focusing on IPRs, and we're starting to see somewhat of an increase in the number of shipments that are intellectually, that are IPR violation shipments coming out of Africa, particularly around brand names like Nike. We're seeing some increase in those shipments getting into Europe. And so we've had to put countermeasures into place to start screening those shipments a lot more closely. And this is becoming a focus area for the authorities. What we call the true shipper, true receiver. Customs are more interested in who's the actual buyer and seller of the goods versus who's the actual shipper and receiver, because that's very important as to who the end user is or who the end seller is. And then goods description is becoming more and more important. The authorities want advanced data. So if you're shipping at the moment, for example, into Europe, if you're an e-commerce retailer in Africa, your data has to be provided to the EU authorities even before your shipments are gone on board an aircraft. It's a system in Europe called RCS2, Import Control System. It's a EU regulatory system that looks at the description of content, and using descriptions on your documentation like clothing or spare parts or gifts or samples is no longer considered acceptable. And these are the 4 focus areas that we're finding customs, not only in Africa, but in the rest of the world, are tending to lean towards. And we particularly at DHL, for example, implemented a focus program, a global customs compliance program, looking at these 4 elements, and interestingly enough, using big data to risk assess these type of elements within our shipping environment. However, around the world, it looks all, hunky-dory. Everything looks good. But when you think of Africa, people think of elephants, they think of animals, they think of pristine wildlife. But for us who's on the ground in Africa, it's more like a picture of a Land Rover being bogged down in mud. And for the consumer trying to understand it all, that picture sums it up. It's a nightmare sometimes, understand the regulatory frameworks. And so very often, it's the logistics industry to whom the consumers look to take the complexity out of the processes and take it to simplicity. And the e-commerce environment is particularly challenging in this regard in terms of understanding the regulatory frameworks and how do they make sure that their buyers are, or their purchasers or consumers are compliant. Do we know if they have tax numbers? Do we know if they're going to meet the regulatory standards when the goods are imported to their country? And so it's a huge quagmire of potential risk that can be created if people don't understand the regulations. And so, whilst that picture on the top left looks like the ideal utopian scenario of what people envisage our regions look like, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But in actual fact as well, some of these environmental factors or these pictures of complexity are often replicated in other regions. I can tell you that South America have as complicated and bureaucratic regulations as some of the countries in Africa do. So we're not isolated in the way that some of our regulatory authorities tend to treat customs clearance. Now, trade facilitation is a big buzzword in the global trading community, and it's becoming more and more relevant in Africa in regards to how trade facilitation should work. A lot of countries have, or most countries have signed the trade facilitation agreement. They have committed to certain standards, including standards that are epitomized in the revised Kyoto Convention. The trade facilitation agreement is working in tandem with some of the ideals of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And so what do we see trade facilitation in Africa involve? And this is also based on what customers are telling us they see it, and they see the involvement of these conventions and these agreements in trying to bring stability and simplicity to their everyday activities of trading cross-border. So trade facilitation involves transparency. The government's the enabler of growth, and the private sector is the engine of growth. And together, it's a collaborative partnership, but it's got to be transparent. Simplification involving simpler, faster, cheaper, and more predictable cross-border trade and the associated processes such as customs and the cost of actually moving those shipments across the border. My biggest pain point I hear from customers is the customs processes. If you get the customs processes right, that's at least 50% of your cross-border logistics challenges resolved. And that's what our objective is. SAPER, of which, as you know, Gary and I belong to, or Gary runs, and I manage the customs portfolio. Part of our focus is how do we make cross-border trade simpler and easier? We engage with SARS, we engage with the DTI, we bring ideas to the table, we bring our experience. So simplification is clear. Harmonization is another one that we're very keen on seeing forwarded as an agenda item, is harmonizing the standards across Africa, creating the same regulatory framework so that everybody adheres to one standard versus multiple different standards that different countries have, especially when it comes to things like pre-shipment inspections or regulatory permits. Everything should be harmonized, and there should be simplistic approaches that we strip out all the manual bureaucracy, move away from the focus on revenue and focus on risk management and proper customs management versus just focusing on how much revenue is going to be derived from inputs and exports. So harmonization is very, very important. Absolute commitment in the AFCTFA, executing the instruments with enthusiasm and passion. So whilst the instruments are there, they haven't yet been fully executed properly across the region. We're not seeing any meaningful trade taking place yet. And that's one of the focus areas that's becoming more and more important as we've been, a year and a half into the Continental Free Trade Agreement so far. And then standardization. We need to proactively transition into international norms and demonstrate continuous improvement. Those are for us the fundamental elements of trade facilitation in the region. How do we make our customers' lives easier? How do the regulatory authorities work with the private sector on bringing these agenda items forward? And there's a lot more collaborative partnerships now than we've seen in the past. The realities. So online selling has attracted particular attention from policymakers because e-commerce in Africa is the bloodstream of digital economy at the national, cross-border, and continental levels, is a good quote to look at and consider. Cross-border e-commerce and B2C and C2C transactions are presenting a number of challenges and opportunities to government and regulatory agencies, as well as the private sector, to foster a mutually beneficial way forward that both protects and facilitates trade. They seem to be mutually exclusive, but you can maintain your level of protection against illegal imports or illicit imports entering your country, but you can also facilitate trade. And we've seen a number of different countries that balance starting to take effect. Not as significantly as we'd like to see it, but it is slowly moving there, but there's still a long way to go. Example in point, they haven't yet finalized or negotiated the e-commerce, or what they're now calling digital trade, under the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's still got to be negotiated. They're ambitiously looking towards completing that by the end of September, if I'm correct. but they haven't yet started those negotiations. There are still outstanding other protocols in phase 1 and phase 2 that still need to be completed. So we haven't yet seen e-commerce and digital trade come to the fore yet for the African Continental Free Trade Area. We talked about this earlier. Growing volumes of cross-border B2C and C2C e-commerce shipments are presenting challenges to stakeholders in terms of ensuring rapid release and clearance while managing safety and security risks, efficient revenue collection, which tends to be unfortunately a focus area for regulatory authorities, and statistical analysis. This fast evolving trading environment, which showed significant growth in during COVID, in some countries, we were seeing e-commerce growth rates in the marketplace of 67 to 70%. It's tempered a little bit now, but and cut back, but definitely with significant growth. But people are starting to now settle back into a new norm of going back out again, going to the shops. And so Amazon, for example, reported for the first time a 3% decline in shipment volumes from customers, and I think it was a $3 or $6 billion loss so far this year. But this fast evolving trading environment requires a series of comprehensive and well-considered solutions from all stakeholders to overcome the lack of global standards, and in our case, regional standards and guidelines, and to address associated border risks. So this lack of global standards has an impact on trade facilitation, because every time an online retailer sells, they've got to consider what are the regulatory requirements in the destination. Now, with the 51 countries I've got, I did research for one of our online retailers once, and every country had a different set of standards, from different de minimis thresholds. So in Zambia, a de minimis threshold for a private importer into Zambia is $2,000 US, below which no duties and taxes are charged. Angola, it's $1,250, depending on the rate of exchange. But then you go across to Kenya, where it's $20, or you come to South Africa, where there is no de minimis, no official de minimis, or you go across to Ghana, where it's $200 US, and it varies. These regulatory frameworks and different value thresholds vary from country to country, region to region. It's only now that the East African Community Parliament is considering a legislative change to effectively place a US $50 de minimis across the East African region and harmonize that. So that's the one area of concern and focus. And then globally harmonized standards are essential in better leveraging the rapidly expanding trade opportunity that e-commerce provides. And a lot of customers need to think beyond, or a lot of traders need to think beyond their conventional domestic borders. Some of the realities and the challenges that we're seeing, well, tariffs, taxes, and non-tariff barriers, NTBs. So signatories to the Continental Free Trade Agreement have recognized that tariffs and non-tariff barriers on cross-border trading must be reduced significantly if the free trade area is to be successful. A good example is the approach to the de minimis rule, which I've just explained and told you about the wide variety of de minimises around the region. And very often what we're seeing is, even when you do have a shipment that qualifies as de minimis, the regulatory authorities, using their discretion, decide to revalue the goods at a value above the de minimis threshold. One of the other big challenges with tariffs and taxes, particularly a sore point with the e-retailers, is if you want to successfully trade online, you've got to have a free or significantly flexible returns policy. And the problem with e-commerce returns, especially within the Africa region where the regulatory frameworks have not been adjusted, is the ability to avoid the triple taxation threat. And what I mean by that is, a customer orders goods online, the goods arrive in the destination country, let's say South Africa, the goods arrive into South Africa, they are delivered as ordered, they are not defective, and the customer looks at them, his wife says to him, "You don't look good in pink, I think you should swap it for a red one." So he decides he's going to send it back to Europe. So he sends it back to Europe. He can't usually, or he will struggle to get a refund on his duties and taxes that he paid on the import, because he's got no evidence that the same goods that came in are the same goods going out. When the goods arrive back in Europe, he may very well struggle with the fact that there is no longer a de minimis threshold in Europe, and the shipment may very well be subject to VAT. And then the e-retailer, for example, sends a replacement shirt to the customer in South Africa, the red one that he really wanted. He's now got to pay taxes again. So you've got triple taxation, and the regulatory frameworks don't really take that into consideration. And that's a major pain point for a number of online retailers. Regulatory issues, including what I've referenced already, that the regulatory framework is underdeveloped sufficiently, and guidelines for data privacy, consumer protection, whilst in the pipeline and on the roadmaps, have yet to be fully implemented. Bureaucracy and corruption remains a challenge, entrepreneurs often encounter red tape, and I can tell you firsthand that that is still a major challenge in many countries. And this bureaucracy and corruption has a direct impact when it comes to e-commerce shipments, because now you've got a sudden rise in the amount of e-commerce shipments. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the bureaucracy and the costs of trying to clear a shipment? And that's why, for example, we're pushing the de minimis threshold values around Africa to be increased so as not to prejudice the small importers bringing in low value e-commerce consignments. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing. And then, of course, traditional challenges such as illicit trade, illicit financial flows, intellectual property right infringements, counterfeit, piracy, and commercial fraud still continue to exist, even with the safeguards that many companies have put in place. What are some of the key takeaways then that we're looking at across the region? Well, in the perspective of the great Pan-Africanist, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, if I can pronounce it correctly, I'm not very good with my pronunciations, it is clear that we must find an African solution to Africa's problems, and that this can only be found in African unity. Divided we are weak, united, Africa could become one of the greater forces for good in the world. And it sounds cliched when you read it and you look at it and you think great words, really, great, but are they realistic? And I think if we put our mind to it and we put theoretical translations into practice, we can certainly achieve a lot more than we have achieved in the past. And we're starting to see traction slowly but surely, but still a long way to go. So what do we see as some of the key takeaways then? Well, information and consultation with private sector stakeholders and industry bodies like SAPA is absolutely critical to driving the trade facilitation agenda, both bringing private sector experience to the table and getting the regulatory authorities to listen to what we have to share and how do we work together to safeguard their interests in regards revenue and protection of what's allowed in and out of the country versus that balance with trade facilitation that I talked about earlier. It also includes investing in the accompanying measures necessary to complement the free trade agreement or the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. It includes intra-African trade infrastructure. Very often people think about the customs processes, but they often forget about the associated infrastructure. So investment in ICT is going to be critical. Single window processing clearance systems that enable all regulatory authorities to speak through one channel and for consumers and importers to deal with one single window when it comes to uploading documents, clearance processes, etc. It includes looking at trade finance, trade information, logistics services, and such provisions are going to help business recognize and realize what trading opportunities these trade agreements can actually produce. A lot of them don't understand these trade agreements and what they can provide in terms of benefits. And so upskilling is going to become more and more important, training them, equipping them, and also building up the capacity of the public sector, the customs officers, through training and change management programs. There's a lot more active involvement in terms of the private sector for advocacy in terms of shaping the direction of these trade bodies and the negotiating institutions to help drive the trade agenda. The involvement of the private sector needs to be institutionalized with membership, for example, of the country's national trade policy committees or the national trade facilitation policy committees, the NTFCs. The public sector needs to ensure that current and future policy and regulatory decisions are not made in isolation or in a silo approach, and they should be inclusive of the private sector. A lot of what Gary, myself, and SAPA, for example, did during COVID was a lot of governmental discussions and negotiations, making sure that our voices were being heard and putting forward arguments to support why we believe a particular change was required. And we had some great success, one of them being the unloading or unleashing of the e-commerce floodgates, so to speak, in June of 2020, when government moved away from differentiating between essential and non-essential goods and allowing all shipments to be ordered online and to be delivered. And that was very, very, very strongly driven by the private sector, not just from a revenue perspective, but from a corporate governance or a corporate social responsibility perspective, by helping to facilitate people getting their basic home comforts without the need to go out to shops and to try and maintain, for example, the curfew conditions that we were under for a number of months or years. The AFCTFA and the trade facilitation agreements, for example, offer us a perfect regulatory framework for a cohesive and complementary cross-border and coordinated management policy that will help achieve the ambitions and the objectives. You know, it looks great on paper. If you read through the AFCTFA and the TFA on paper, it looks wonderful. After hours customs support is simplified clearance, pre-clearance. The realities on the ground are a little bit distant from what's written on paper and what's been agreed upon. And so these frameworks offer the perfect regulatory framework but they're only as good as how you implement them in the countries. In terms of mapping the way forward, our focus tends to be on, in terms of e-commerce and cross-border trade, driving risk profiling. Don't take a one-size-fits-all approach and inspect everything. In one of the West African countries, for example, they've got a €300 de minimis, but every single shipment is subject to inspection. So it sits in customs for 2 to 3 days, yet it's only valued at about 100, €150 because they're so focused on the revenue opportunity that shipment may involve that they forget about the trade facilitation elements. So driving risk profiling is important. Increasing the reliance on advanced data provision, using the advanced data that's available through a lot of logistics companies in advance of the shipment's arrival. Very often that data is available at least 24 hours before a shipment arrives at destination. I can tell you that in South Africa, we're currently pre-clearing around 78% of our consignments that are coming in before they've even arrived in South Africa, simply through advanced data usage and managing that data provision to customs prior to the flight's arrival. Proper planning and change management coupled with legislation that is simple and transparent is going to be critical in mapping a sustainable way forward for e-commerce and for the correct implementation and management of free trade protocols. Change would need, such change would need organizational change with customs administrations and cultural change and adaptation. We need capacity building, including training and change facilitation for the public sector, so the private sector can bring to the table that opportunity to train and equip and build the capacity of the public sector in terms of risk profiling, understanding international conventions, understanding logistics and the fundamentals of customs, and then upskilling traders to understand and leverage of the AFCTFA and other trade agreements. Very often what I find is that there's a lack of understanding as to what the agreements can bring to the table for these traders and how they can leverage off it. So training and capacity building is critical. So the training service providers are going to bring a fundamentally critical solution to the table, and one of the ones that I consider to be probably the most important, other than risk profiling and digitalization. We need to improve the regulations for MSMEs and treatment of low-value shipments and simplify that. And then we need to develop a cohesive and practical e-commerce framework, including digital trade, lowering and eliminating tariff barriers, policy and structural reforms to replace the patchwork that we see of regional agreements. So you have one set of agreements in the East African community, you see another set of agreements in ECOWAS, and then you've got SADC with another set of agreements. And this patchwork of agreements need to be cohesively brought together within a continental-wide agreement such as the AFCTFA. African governments need to undertake regular consultations, as I've mentioned, with the private sector. The private sector needs to be sensitized about the AFCTFA. They must be able to identify the opportunities that these agreements provide to remain competitive. We also need to look at the challenges that emanate from mercantilism and nationalistic tendencies, where governments are only interested in protecting their own country's interests over and above regional interests. And then we need to look at, and an interesting one is the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. And this is a particularly topical discussion point in South Africa at the moment as to how we do this. We know that the regional economic communities like SADC, ECOWAS are the building blocks to the AFCTFA. So are other trade agreements. And we're saying that the private sector professionals should be mutually recognized across the region and equitably allowing the private sector to practice and work with those qualifications across the region. So it's an important one as well, because there are skill gaps, especially within logistics, for example, that can be easily addressed by allowing people with qualifications to be having those qualifications recognized in other countries. Right, so that is what I would like to, or what I've shared with you today in terms of where we're at. A lot of work to be done, but a lot of work has been done and has had some successful implementations in a number of regions or across the African continent. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's still a lot of positivity. We're seeing changes to the mindset of customs in terms of the public-private dialogue. We're seeing a lot more involvement of the private sector in those dialogues and listening to what we're having to bring to the table. In South Africa, for example, I can tell you, when I first started attending the National Trade Facilitation Committee meetings in Pretoria with SARS, who was the instrument that the DTI was using to implement the Trade Facilitation Agreement, I can tell you at the start of those agreement discussions, we were sitting in almost like a cinema seating arrangement. They were at the front, we were in the audience listening to what they were saying. There wasn't that a round table collaborative approach. And a year, two years later, following advocacy by the private sector, we're now sitting around a table and we're engaging with each other in a more mutually beneficial way than sitting in a unilateral discussion where they present to us, tell us what the changes are, and we're allowed to ask questions. Now they're asking for our opinions, our views, and what we think should be done before they go ahead and do it. So a lot more surveys, a lot more interactivity going on in South Africa, for example, as a demonstration of that change. And then, of course, digitalization is the other pressing issue across the region. How do we get countries to start recognizing digital trade as critical to their trade facilitation agenda? It's in documented form and it's on their roadmaps, but it's not actually being practiced in reality. And that goes back to the discussion I mentioned earlier about theory versus practical realities. So that information is what I'd like to what I've shared with you. I hope that you have gained a bit of insight into where we see some of the challenges, and then also ask yourself the question: where do I get involved? What do I need to be doing, and how do I need to be adjusting my business to take advantage of these agreements and trade agendas across the region? So thank you, Gary.
No, thanks very much, Jace. Very interesting. As usual, I love listening to you, and your both your knowledge and your passion comes through very, very strongly. So thanks, Jason. Okay, Harry.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, we're going to do the panel discussion now, questions and answers. If we can kindly have all the panelists, so it's Reino and Elliot and Jason and Gary, to kindly switch on your cameras and unmute yourself so that you can bring you into the panel. Thank you very much. So there's our panelists. Ladies and gents, you're welcome to go to the bottom of your screens with reactions. You'll see reactions there. You'll see there's a raise hand option. You can raise your hand. There's quite a number of people on YouTube. You're welcome to text the question for the panelists on YouTube as well. And let's see if we can get some questions. While the people are thinking, I was just thinking myself in terms of dangerous goods. Dangerous goods, obviously for cargo aircraft. I don't see that taking place for belly cargo.
Sorry, I didn't get that question on dangerous goods. Please repeat it.
Thank you, Elliot. That's a question I have. Dangerous goods, that won't be allowed in belly cargo, commercial aircraft, passenger aircraft.
Yeah, there's what we call limitations on dangerous goods. So there are those dangerous goods that are completely forbidden to fly at all. So the type that are completely forbidden to fly will be things like toxic gases and a whole lot of explosives. So they are really not allowed to fly. There are those that are allowed to fly only on freighters, that is cargo aircraft. And then there are those that are allowed to fly, or they are allowed to fly in passenger aircraft. So there are different limitations. So for instance, they would say maybe you are allowed to move a certain tonnage or a certain kilograms on passenger aircraft, and then on freighters you can have a much more higher kilograms on it. So they vary. Yes, there are those that are not allowed to fly in passenger aircraft. There are those that are only allowed to fly in freighters. Thank you.
No, thank you, Elliot. All right. It seems to me we don't have any questions. People are stunned with all the presentations. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to request in closing remarks from our panelists, and then I'll give our host, Gary Marshall, the last word to close the session for us. And from the Transport Forum side, we'd like to thank you guys for attending, and thank you for the South African Express Parcel Association for hosting this event, and for Gary for putting this program together. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to doing this with you again. So yeah, so we're going to start with Jason, then we can do Reino, then we can do Elliot, and then over to Gary to close the session for us. So Jason, closing comments.
Yeah, I think the global trade environment and the African trade environment is progressing rapidly. As I talked about in my first opening slide, it's evolving on a rapid basis, on a daily basis for us. And traders and the public sector need to grab the opportunity to facilitate trade across the region, implement the trade protocols and conventions that they've agreed to, The private sector needs to play their part in upskilling their trading communities, providing capacity building to the public authorities, and to keep the trade agenda at the forefront of everybody's minds. The ACTFA, as I mentioned, went live on the 1st of January 2021. A year and a half later, we haven't seen any meaningful trade. The discussion points that I raised in my presentation are the key areas that we need to focus on collectively, both at a public and a private sector, to drive the change that we need across Africa and to bring tangibility to all of the objectives and the theoretical concepts that these trade agreements espouse. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work across the region in that objective. I think it's a common collective goal that everybody shares. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year holds and going into 2023 as to whether we're going to see traction in Africa and the rest of the world on these agreements and bringing some realities onto the ground. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Jason. Reino.
Yeah, just in summary, I think looking at the on-demand industry as a whole in South Africa, referring only to South Africa now, I think the biggest thing that we've learned, I would say, from an RTT perspective, is that invest in your systems. Your systems needs to enable you to give you the economies of scale as well as the scalability to take this space forward. And I think personally, as a personal view, I think we're just scratching the surface. I think there's much more to come in the on-demand space as a whole in South Africa. So it's a very exciting space to be in. And yeah, Harry and Gary, thanks for the opportunity, much appreciated. And yeah, looking forward to engaging with everybody in future. Thanks.
Thank you, Reino. Elliot.
I think the cost to the entire industry. My point is that the cost of not complying is much more high than the cost of complying. So comply with what is needed, but don't only comply as a tick box exercise. Just comply with the spirits of the regulations that are there. Remembering that it's people's lives that are inside those aircraft. And if an aircraft crashes and it crashes in a densely populated area, it's going to kill way much more than the people that are inside that aircraft. So let's comply with the spirits of the regulations. And then make civil aviation safe for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Over to our host, Gary, to close the session for us. Thank you, Gary.
Well, thanks to all of the speakers. So when I opened this thing, I put up a slide that said the word courier. And there are many ways to describe our industry, whether it's courier, whether it's express, it doesn't matter. We're all in the time-definite delivery component. And when I opened it up, I said the Latin word for courier means currere, which means to run. And I guess that's what we do. So if you listen to the speakers just in this session here, from Jason with all of the regulatory issues, particularly around customs and trade agreements, we as an industry and spearheaded by guys like Jason are running hard at trying to facilitate trade within the rules. And where the rules are nonsense, we try to point that out and work together with authorities to change them. If you have a look at what Reino was talking about, trailblazing, running hard at creating new industries. What Elliot was talking about should not be seen as a blockage. What he's talking about is making it safer and allowing air travel to become something that nobody is afraid of. So I think all around, we're all running like mad. And for our industry, it's probably why we're the fastest growing component of the entire transportation sector. And I listen to professionals like we've had here today and the kind of things that are going on, you can see why we are running. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gary. See you guys again next week, Thursday. And spending time with South African Association of Freight Forwarders. Take care. See you guys next time. Thank you.
Thank you.